Hello.
Hello, Riz.
Hello there. How are you?
Fine. Lovely to finally see you.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to see you. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Perfect. So, and here we are for our workshop that we've been working a lot on, and you
Yes.
too, as I know. You've been sending me all the elements, so I was checking them out. Perfect. Do you have
You're
questions?
happy with the content, yes?
A lot.
Okay.
I think this will be really the push we needed for the project. And afterwards, we'll talk about a little bit of the findings of the project. So it's perfect. So I want to introduce you to Roberta. She's our scholarship holder.
Hello.
And I don't know, Roberta, maybe we start with ourselves when time is here. And then do we let the other members of the team as speakers immediately? What do you think, Rhys?
Is that a question
Up
about
to us.
I wasn't sure. So when we start at 2 o'clock, it's a matter of introducing ourselves. Is that what you were just suggesting, or were you going to make
I would just
at the beginning, obviously?
I would just introduce very briefly the project itself and the
Right.
subject.
Okay.
And then I would introduce you, and then we would go immediately to your presentation. Roberta, please allow Rhys to share the screen and also share the PowerPoint.
I already put him as a co-host. It's very nice meeting you, Mr. CLIFT.
It's a pleasure too. Should I be using my screen share device on Zoom from this end? Is that how I do it?
Probably better.
Okay.
That you can adjust with the timing of
I have Victoria here to assist me doing that because
Hi.
We already gave you all the permissions, so you can use your device.
Do you want me to get that onto the screen between us now so that we can see it, Victoria? How do I do that?
We could, and then
you can test
one share so that we see that everything is running smoothly. Yes, it could be done. Yeah.
To the top.
I think that's
perfect. Just need to put it in to the top. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to put the cursor at the beginning of the talk.
And
there we are. So that's how it begins.
Yeah.
And I'll just put the
maybe
the sideline. There we are. How's that? Can you see that?
It's perfect, and it has a good presentation in the screen, much better than our PowerPoints, Roberta.
Don't speak too soon.
This is an expert talking. Yes, so you can unshare so that we can just present, and then you just do this in the beginning, and it will be just fine.
Right. So talk me through that again. So you want me to stop share now until you've done the introductions?
So that we can do the introduction.
Stop share.
We are in full screen.
Now, Victoria, talk me through it again. What's the quickest way of me loading? I go to the green button. Yeah. I'm just making sure that I get this in a faultless way. So that's it there now. Yes, that's it there. And I press share. I'm just going to do that. I'm doing this twice to make sure that it really does work, you know.
Perfect.
And there it is. I understand entirely how to do that now. So I press screen share and then I load it. Yes.
Roberta, you can put all the speakers if they are in, so that we can also all of them meet Rhys, Mr. Rhys CLIFT. I'm already going to Rhys, so he is Dulce. So, but you can promote to speaker all the others, and then around 1 or 2 minutes we'll start.
Okay.
Punctually for Portuguese standards, we have. Do you know that in Coimbra, where teacher at university, we have what we call the 15 academic minutes, quarter of an hour. There, things only start quarter of an hour later.
Oh.
Yes, this is established. For instance, in the schedule, our classes start at 9.
Right.
They only start at 9:15. So, and both professors, students know that, so no one is there at 9. So, and it keeps going like this throughout the whole day. So it's a very established thing, but we'll try to keep up with schedules. Will not be will not, although I am in Coimbra, Roberta is in Coimbra, maybe KÁTIA is also in Coimbra. KÁTIA is here, also a member of the project. TORGEIR from Norway is also here, Trondheim, and I think LIA was already there. Roberta, if you can also promote LIA.
Hi to everyone.
I'm trying. I don't know why it didn't happen yet. I've done it
She
twice.
has to accept. She has to accept.
Oh, okay. Then
To accept, that's
Okay, so those people who are going to watch or to listen or watch and listen are going to be invisible while I'm speaking, are they? Yes.
you can see them on the right.
That's probably best. But, in that
Not to
case,
be
I won't see anybody
distracted.
yawning, you know.
LIA also from Lisbon, also from the project. So you have here, we have other members of the project, and we will maybe afterwards put them into the screen, but now not to distract everyone. Will it will
Yes.
just be us, and you will present your, of course, your PowerPoint will fill in the screen, and then we will be on the side. We already have some public, so Roberta will keep us informed, and I will inform you afterwards about
Okay.
about the public. So maybe, I don't know, does everyone agree that it will start to kick off with schedule? Yes.
Yes.
And regarding the, well, I will say everything so in a minute. So
Okay.
let's do then a formal start to our workshop on maritime mediation. I'm really satisfied that we managed to have this workshop done today with a guest that I will in a while present, and with the partners of the project, as you know, from Coimbra, Lisbon MARE, Leiria IPL, and also NTNU from Trondheim in Norway. So this is a project that is funded by the EEA grants and has been going on for a bit more than a year. And this is a workshop to present already the main findings that we have reached through the activities that have been going on among the partners, and also some of dissemination and communication of science. As everyone knows, mediation is a very relevant alternative dispute resolution mechanism that has gained international and national, in our legal orders, attention over the past decades, given its ability to solve highly technical disputes and other conflicts that do not find in courts or even through arbitration a proper or adequate seat for resolution. Mediation is also a mechanism that promotes self-composition of interests from several parties, public and private, involved, and it aims at a greater change of behavior and also compliance with good governance standards than the ones that we believe in the project could be prompted by the intervention of other dispute solution mechanisms. In the maritime area, mediation finds a particularly rich field for development, but that it is still underexplored, at least in some of our legal orders. We'll see what our guest has to say, because there are others where it is already greatly developed, and we want to gather a bit and breathe a bit of that experience. And the purpose of the project is, as you can see, to unlock this potential of mediation in areas or places where it is still a bit unknown or less developed, in order to promote an equitable and safe culture for all involved. This is just a presentation of the purposes of the workshop. We will be in full screen, the speakers and the members of the project. The public will be hidden at this point, but of course you can pose questions through the chat. We'll have a debate moment, and then I could either pose the questions orally to the speakers, or you, if you want, could be promoted also to speaker for that part. Okay, this is specifically for the public, but for purposes of not filling up the screen with everyone at this moment, we'll start like we are with our guest that I will now introduce, and members of the partners from the project. So Mr. RHYS CLIFT is a maritime mediator with a vast experience in England and Wales. He was trained and accredited as a mediator by CEDR in 1988, so working on this issue for quite a while now. Mr. CLIFT co-founded the Maritime Solicitors Mediation Service in 2003 and administered it until 2018. He's also a co-founder of the SeaMediation Chambers, dated 2014, and is a distinguished neutral at CPR, the International Institute for Conflict Prevention and Resolution in New York. So quite an impressive resume, a very short one due to time constraints, but it just shows us how much we have to benefit from your talk today. So, Mr. RHYS CLIFT, I give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to put up a PowerPoint screen by share mechanism on the screen so that we can all follow the text. And largely what I'm going to do is to speak to the text. It's something that you can probably read easily, and you might want to read after if we wish. But let me just share this screen and then we can start. All right, the subject of this talk is seen in the title, Cultural Issues in Mediation. And fundamentally, this is a talk not about the process itself, not about the disputes that underlie these processes, court systems, arbitration, or the mechanics of running mediations. This is about dealing fundamentally with people. This, I'm going to move now. I'm going to use the on mechanism. So we're going to use the scroll forwards. Well, we hope we're going to scroll forward shortly. We've lost the scroll mechanism. Can we find that? I'm sorry about that. This happens with IT, you know. So this is an outline of my talk. I'm going to talk very briefly about the framework of international mediation, and then about the participants. And it's really the participants, the people. Mediation is fundamentally about people. I'm going to touch on the sorts of skills, the required skills that are useful, both for mediators like me and many others, and also for participants. What are the sort of things you need to know? What are the things you could usefully inform yourself about? I'm touching on some notional categorizations, not necessarily made by me, but made in, there's a fund of literature on this, and most interesting of which is probably David Lewis's book called A Clash of Cultures, or When Cultures Collide. But it's also informed by my experience of work in this field, not necessarily mediation, but in the resolution of disputes in the maritime field for the last 40 years. These are matters that are useful to analyze. How do you deal with time? How do you deal with status and leadership when dealing with people? What about language, different languages, ability to speak, ability to understand, and then some conclusions. And at the end, you'll find some observations that are not really about people. They're more about the process of mediation, touching on some questions that have frequently arisen and which have interesting responses. In order for you to help you analyze the process itself. Now, the framework of international mediation I see through the lens of London dispute resolution. Why is it that London has become something of an international center? There may be many reasons. London has really adopted mediation as an adjunct to court process and arbitration. It's pretty much been subsumed within the process as an integral part of it. You probably know that, like many countries, English courts are able to handle disputes not confined to English law. So we welcome the resolution of disputes in foreign law, and foreign law is admissible here by evidence of fact. These are observations made in certain literature I've read, but I think it's a fair reflection, at least of my experience in work, that our legal process is generally well regarded for honesty and fairness and thoroughness and intellectual rigor. So English arbitration litigation form a strong framework, if you like, on which mediation can attach itself for the resolution of problems. When we look at participants, I've sketched out here a few factors that might be worth consideration. There are cultural differences between people. There are national characteristics, or at least we say there are, and we might observe them in others, and maybe even regional characteristics within any one nation state, say. When you look at participants against their cultural background, people handle time and silence and seniority and status, and they listen in different ways. Their body language is different. And that's partly a product of their culture and upbringing, but it's partly a product of their grasp and understanding of the problems in issue and their grasp on the understanding of the language itself. What are the sort of things that one should be aware of? What sort of skills should you have when handling mediation? Not the process itself, but dealing with the people. Generally speaking, it's wise to develop a cultural awareness, empathy for people, understanding the other person's position. Mediators need to be tactful and subtle. They need to handle problems that are presented to them and the parties that presented and the behavior they see positively as best they can. And they need to listen. Listening to what people say is one of the most important skills in mediation and one of the most useful skills to have as a participant. You might say suppressing your own maybe natural instincts, things that one has to have are, one has to be patient and calm. And one thing that's particularly important with cultures that are, say, far separated in their way is an understanding of form and protocol. Societies have very different ways of dealing with form and protocol. Mediators need to show respect. Parties need to show respect for each other. But that doesn't mean abandoning objectives, reasonable objectives. Parties and mediators have to be reserved, but they have to have a resolve. They have to have targets and objectives, and they need self-discipline and a focus in order to do so. Now, this is a grouping or a categorization of groups of people or groups of culture devised by David Lewis, and it's in his book, When Cultures Collide. It's a fascinating book. You don't need to pick it up and read it at the beginning. Open it in the middle, pick a culture or a society, and look at the diagrams and the descriptions. They're absolutely riveting. But broadly, he divides cultures and peoples into three different types. The so-called linear actives, and you may say, you might recognize some of these. The linear actives, people that organize, plan, schedule, they do one thing at a time in an orderly and disciplined way. That's one grouping of people. And then are the so-called multi-actives, the so-called multifunctionals, multitaskers, if you like, less focused on time and schedules, people who start multiple things all at once, talkers, communicators. We might call them chatty in English. You know, they chat, they're effusive. And last of all, the reactives, people who have a very high regard and respect and courtesy for others and for age and for seniority. They're focused on listening. They respond carefully. Now, that's not to say that the others within the other groups don't have many of these characteristics. It's just that these are a group of defined characteristics shared by particular groups of people in the observation of David Lewis and others. Now, what do linear actives do? How would you recognize them? You can imagine them targeting, planning, scheduling tasks, getting things done in the time allowed, starting on time, ending on time, orderliness, tidiness, aims and objectives. And typically, although as you see, I've put these with question marks, typically the general view is that Germanic people tend to be of this ilk. I can see you're smiling because you might recognize that. There's some truth in these things, although everybody is different. Germanic people, Scandinavian people, broadly, may I say, those that I've met are like this. So David Lewis maybe has the right view. Some Americans, well, of course, many Americans are Germanic or Scandinavian in their origin, or Anglo-Saxon in their origin. And it's also true of some British people too. So some British people are linear actives and some are not, I guess. The so-called multi-actives, well, I said at the beginning that these are people who are less focused on time and punctuality. Talking to them is very important, maybe more important than the passage of time. You know, they might start late and want to finish early. They want to talk. They put an investment into relationships with people. They want to know about you. Who are you? How do you fit in? What about your family even in business meetings? Quite intriguing. And I've listed here, although I might be wrong, the Spanish, the Italians, the Southern European cultures, and possibly the Arabic. And that is from David Lewis's categorization and groupings of peoples, but also in truth, it's from some of my own experience as well. So my experience somewhat measures his analysis. What about reactive people? Who are they? Where do you observe them? What do they do? Well, they're courteous in what they observe to be or treat as opponent's time. They're courteous to the other person's time. They wish to establish trust and relationships. They're quite structured. They allow for careful contemplation and consideration, and they have very elaborate social courtesies, or may have. And an example of that is, for example, picking one item out of many, the Japanese social courtesy of the exchange of cards. They will tender their card to you in a particular way. And broadly, they expect that sort of thing to be reciprocated. And if it is reciprocated, it eases your relationship and might ease your mediation. So they can be indirect. They might not say yes or no directly in a way that certain others might, perhaps. And they might give the impression that they're agreeing with you, even if they don't, because they might not wish to show that they disagree. So these are a compendium of characteristics that apply to some people, not necessarily all, but there's an essential element of I know, truth or accuracy in it. And David Lewis, I rely on as my witness. Where might you find reactives or reactive cultures and peoples? The sort of places that are described here, Japan and China, Singapore and Hong Kong. Although Hong Kong and Singapore have got an admixture of cultures and some framework of British ideas and behavior. Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia, you see what I mean, broadly these places. Curiously, perhaps, one country that is grouped in with this group of countries by David Lewis is Finland, because of Finnish behavior being somewhat different. I can't speak for Finns, but this is what David Lewis says. And some British and Swedish people, possibly even Norwegian people. But this is an interesting grouping. Now, if you have together in a mediation or gather in a room for a meeting, a group of those who one might broadly categorize, but taking care not to form views without speaking, just observing. If you have linear actives and multi-actives and reactives all grouped together, then their cultural behaviors might be very different. And if they're all parties to a dispute, it can be quite complicated to manage them or to assist them to manage each other and to get on. This is one reason why mediators very much favor what's called pre-mediation contact. You might have meetings over Zoom. You might have phone calls. You might have meetings in person. But one of the reasons to do this is to, as it were, get used to the people that you're dealing with and for them to get used to you. What about status and leadership? Moving on from those broad categorizations. Well, status and leadership is actually very important in dealing with groups of people in particular. Single individuals, perhaps less so, but for groups of people, even more so. And I've just looked very briefly at how the British and the Americans deal with status and leadership. This is a snapshot, and I'm going to come back to a little bit more about the Americans and the British in a moment. But the impression given by British people say and again, I'm quoting David Lewis, but since I'm British, I've observed it in others, an apparent casualness, a deference to status, and maybe even educational establishment or family name, notwithstanding the fact we live in a meritocracy, a certain toughness that's underneath a congeniality, a deference to seniority, probably. We'd like to claim that we have poison charm. You'll have to judge that for yourselves. But, some say that the British have, and the English in particular, developed a certain linguistic arrogance. I don't know whether I got the right word with arrogance there, but certainly it is the case that there's been a declining interest in learning foreign languages, curiously, amongst English people. And part of that, I think, is because English has become the global lingua franca of business. Maybe now there is a reluctance amongst the British to speak or learn foreign languages. So in terms of deference to the people they're dealing with, there's a margin of reduced deference because they're sticking to their own language. The Americans, even though we speak the same language or nearly the same language as the Americans, not the same language as anybody will know who goes there regularly, the Americans have a strong work ethic. They have a less structured and less subtly regulated society. There is observed, and Lewis observes this again in his book, in this element of speed and dynamism and risk-taking, individual actions rather than collegiate team action, a self-interest, a certain urgency and impatience apparently that characterizes some of their behavior. And one can observe that perhaps in some, but not all, of course. What about language? Having touched on the Americans and the Brits briefly, what about language? When you're dealing with a mediation, you've got to be able to communicate with people. So you've got to have a language that you can work with. And at the beginning in a pre-mediation, you have people from all around the world, from different locations. You have to ask yourself, even if there's an appearance that they understand, what's the true grasp of their language? Can they penetrate the subtlety of what you're saying and the fine distinctions, particularly in disputes? Disputes can have very fine distinctions that can only be followed by a proper understanding of the words used. So if you're speaking to people whose mother tongue is not English or not your language, you have to ask yourself, is their grasp of the language, notwithstanding appearances, is it genuinely bilingual? Which I must say, in my experience, is incredibly rare. Incredibly rare. Fluency, now that's more common in the business world, but still rare. Fluent business standard language in 1, 2, or 3 languages is rare, but some knowledge of language is very common, particularly English. English is widespread and people have a lot of bits of knowledge, but do they understand everything? And is there a danger in a little knowledge? You have to know, do people understand what I'm saying? And mediators, when they're presented with these sorts of problems, have to ask themselves, well, if the parties maybe don't have a sufficient grasp of the language, in order to show them respect and they can participate, what do? You probably need to allow more time. You might need a permanent translator in the room, although that's not without its hazards, I can tell you. I was giving a lecture in Venezuela, and the arrangement we came to was that the translator would sit beside me and would translate, first of all, every paragraph and then every sentence. Now, my Spanish is basic, but it was obvious to me after a certain amount of talk that what I was saying and what the translator was saying were not the same thing. So beware. If you lose a lawyer as an interface, what sort of head is the lawyer using? Is he using his linguistic mind to translate the thoughts expressed? Or is it partly colored by his views of the process, the outcome, the dispute, the details? In other words, has he got part of his lawyer's brain on? So if you're using the lawyer of some party as a translator to convey a meaning, you know, there's always an element where you need to take care. So where there are language issues, deal with significant conflict. Co-mediation is useful sometimes to get someone who speaks the language. Now, with languages, of course, issues. It might cost you more money. It might take more time. You need to think about who goes where, how much you be involved. We need to think about all of these things. Language is fundamental to the dealings of mediation. And you need to think about that too with mediation agreements, because they're often written. People sign them before participating. Does everybody understand what it means? So don't sit down and sign it on the day 5 minutes before you start, because people might well say, well, I didn't really understand that that's what we were doing. So I was just going to skim through a few things about Anglophones. I've got 3 groups of Anglophones. I've got the British, the Americans, and the Australians. And the British, the American, Australians theoretically speak all the same language, but trust me, they don't. That's my experience of it. And by their nature, they're very different sorts of people. So these are sweeping generalizations that may or may not be true, but they're indicative of an essential something to be borne in mind. The British, it is said, love jokes and anecdotes. We like explaining problems by telling stories. There's some truth in that. We like humor to move meetings forward, even if it's self-deprecatory. We would tell a joke against ourselves. This is a deeply seated cultural thing about the British dealings. So it said, understatement. You know, we are not. We don't claim to be the master of the universe, at least not every day of the week. But there's an element of understatement in the way that British explain themselves. Explanation by storytelling is core to our behavior. We might be apparently vague, and we might seem to be apparently reasonable. But don't be fooled, because underneath there could be a discipline and purpose, an organization. So the charm and the poise might conceal a certain toughness and intent. And that's true of all cultures and societies. It's masked in a particular way by the British way of being. We like relationship networks. We have some respect and deference for them. We do like long-term relationships. There is a willingness amongst the British to negotiate deals by talking, but there's also ultimately a preference for putting things in writing. The devil is in the detail. What does the contract say? What about the Americans? I'm going to skim through the Americans. Of course, I'm not an American. I know them less. I've met many Americans in the course of a 40-year working life. And of course, Mr. Lewis says quite a bit about them in his book. There's an informality in their business dealings, generally. They will get to know your first name very soon and they'll start using it. Some societies don't like that. First names, friendly terms, quite personal, humorous, risk-taking, quick. They're very keen on cost-benefit analysis. They're quite, relatively speaking, driven, or at least some of them are. They do like making deals, and they will put their hand out to you and say, agreed. English people might say, well, I think so, but what does it look like when it's written down? They like the big picture, details later. They can be perceived to be, at least some of them, those I've met, impatient and hard driving. They want to get it fixed. They want it sorted now, which some people interpret as bluntness, but it can be clearness. They're simply being emphatic about what's needed to be done. America has tremendous economic and cultural strength, and has had for more than 100 years. And I think that slightly pervades their culture. They have, it is said by some, a lack of interest in consensus. That may not be true, but they certainly do like to adhere to American norms. They like the American way of doing things. Some say they have a lack of awareness in foreign cultures. That might be true of some, but many that I've met actually are highly sophisticated and unaware of these sorts of things. What do people's appearance say? Their cards, social mores. So these are some things about them. We speak a different language to the Americans, and certainly a different language to the Australians. The Australians are really quite different. And there is, in contradistinction, say, to British, they are classless. They're also humorous. They like a common sense approach to things. These are sweeping generalizations, you understand. But there's a certain something in this, which is a certain truth to it. A commonsensical approach. They like equality. They're not particularly keen on granting deference to authority, as we occasionally read in their press, in their comments about the British. One might say they have a deference and, I beg your pardon, an antipathy to authority. That could be true. They are and have been since the mid-70s very focused on their dealings with the East, their near neighbors, their traders. The Chinese, the Koreans, the Japanese, they've developed a huge network of trade that is focused on the East, whereas hitherto for the previous 200 years, they were intimately focused on and tied up with the West. Things that one observes that Lewis comments on is that the Australians have a relative lack of ease in dealing with privilege. They don't particularly like it. Criticism, apparently it is said they don't particularly like it, and they don't like praise. They don't like being praised for something particularly, so it is said. But they are very positive people, and there's one easy way of resolving any discussion with Australians is to bring up the list. Test match, cricket match, rugby match, football, but would practically solve any problem. But Australians do have a great love for sport, and they're very good at it. So that's just a sketch of 3 groups of Anglophones, and you can imagine these sorts of comparisons being made across cultures more widely. So this is an introduction to a topic on which there's a huge literature and a fund of information valuable for the conduct of mediations and making deals. So matching up these people can be useful when mediators has to look at people and understand what sort of cultural framework they may have when they come. Useful to do that at pre-mediations, and useful to keep closely in mind throughout a business day, watching how people react and behave. This explanation I've given you is what we would call in English a thumbnail sketch. It's a bare outline. It's a sketch of something that is probably a highly complex picture. This study of cultural characteristics is a very well-established and profoundly researched science with a substantial literature. And it's a valuable and useful thing for people engaged in mediation to understand the sorts of issues that can arise. These international mediations are fundamentally, okay, they're about problems, details, times, contracts, damages, but fundamentally they're about people. Almost every form of conflict, whether it's a commercial conflict or, God forbid, whether it's a military conflict, almost always ends in a discussion. And if you want a discussion, you've got to speak and you've got to listen. And the differences and similarities between people can be fundamental to deal making, which is the reason why it's a subject in which I'm so interested and why I'm giving this talk. Everybody's different, notwithstanding cultural labels that could be applied across nations. But mediations are more successful if the potential differences are understood. And there's a little reminder, not a warning, but a reminder about how to approach problems. Parties and mediators always, whatever these things, whatever your state of knowledge about cultural pointers might be, avoid prejudgments, avoid prejudice and stereotyping, avoid working on assumptions. Keep a very open mind. Be aware, be open-minded, careful and alert. But ideally, before you embark on international mediation, be well informed. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It was really wonderful. It was an insightful and experienced approach to mediation. One that I should say, and Leah, one of our partners, was saying that through Akira message we shared, was that we are lacking this in the project. So it really came to fill in one of the elements that we need to also bring into the project, and Leah is going to take care of that because she's also an expert, a mediator, and an experienced mediator such as RHYS, although probably in other fields. But indeed it was wonderful, as I expected, and I thank you a lot for your intervention. I would open up the floor. We have now a small period for debate, so if anyone wants to ask a question to Mr. RHYS CLIFT, he's all ours for some minutes more. And so I would give the floor to anyone who wishes to pose a question. The other participants, we have so far 37. You could also, if you wish, just put it on the chat, and then we will Leah now raise their hand, but everyone who wants, just raise your hand, put it on the chat, and then we will promote you to speaker, and then you can put your question directly. Leah, please.
Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for such a nice synthesis of all these differences. Actually, I lived for 4 years in the US, and it was amazing how difficult it was for such a country with such a diversified cultures to understand the other one's culture. But it's true. In most places, that was what I found. And I'm kind of interesting in because you gave us something that was rather important for our project, that is a look into different ways of doing mediation, because we all know there is no one way. It depends on your profile and everything else, but you could do a very clear and direct organization and structure of each one of them. And thank you, because I think that is going to be very useful for us too. I have also with me usually another co-author of my presentation that I would like to request you to accept it in the panel, because and I was thinking about what you had said about the different profiles, and you mentioned the one with linear actions. And also in our mediation session, she is the one, she's from German origin. So she is the one that takes care of times. I'm very bad at that. And myself, it's more on the multi-active ones. I'm more concerned about how we can talk to each other and things like that, and not so much with time. I sometimes even forget time. So we are very complementary and we work very well, both of us together. So thank you for your contribution. This is more a comment. I'm going to read the book. I hope you leave the Lois book for us to go through it. And probably you will be in touch for the remaining of the project, at least. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. RHYS is already invited to our final dissemination event. I hope Mr. RHYS can make it, but I'll let you respond.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much. At the end of that set of slides, you'll find some slides about process as well, which I didn't talk about today, but you might find useful as an adjunct to the observations I made about culture and people. I think your project is terrific. I've been involved in mediation now for more than 20 years, and I think it's a wonderful thing because it works, and the more widely spread it becomes, the more benefit people will get from it. Many people have experienced the difficulties and hostility, cost and anxiety caused by legal disputes of whatever type, and it doesn't matter whether they're large or small. Sitting down to sort problems out ultimately is the desirable thing to do, in my view.
Very well. We have Ursula coming into the room, Stian also, if they wish to.
Well,
We don't have the image yet, but we hear you, Ursula.
let me see. Do you have an image now?
Not yet.
Not. I think this is the webinar style because I came in as a guest. It is
Maybe.
just to underline. I'm this German colleague of LIA, and we are a perfect match with good cop and bad cop, or whatever is needed in these two different types of persons. Obviously, that was just to underline. Yeah, it's like that.
Very well. So I don't know if anyone else wants to pose a question, but I have one. So this and going a bit with this close connection between Ursula and LIA, they work a lot together. So do you believe that whenever you have a mediation, and many of them have parties that come from all of this, of these bundles of cultures, do you think that it is also advisable to have a mixed group of mediators, as we were presented here now with this dynamic double of Ursula and LIA working on mediation and having totally different structural and cultural pointers?
I think when we go to the ground, you have a diversified number of people. either in the profiles, but on knowledge and cultures. And having two persons that can be complementary, actually a mediation team that is complementary is rather important. And we have noticed that in some phases that one of us or one of our team, because we have sometimes teams that are enlarged, me, Ursi, and other people, it's very important to respond to some of the questions of the participants, because sometimes we are giving an answer in a certain way, in a certain perspective, but they are not getting the thing correctly. And if someone else explains in other ways, they get there. And we have seen that happen in our sessions.
Mm-hmm. And Uris, have you had this experience of sharing mediation with colleagues also from other no?
To be honest, I haven't. When I first started doing this, I went through a process where I would learn by accompanying mediators. So I would, for the most part, observe them, and I wouldn't participate. I was an observer. For the most part, they were English lawyers, and I developed this experience in London, where I did see mediators from different cultures. Was taking part in the international mediation competition at the ICC in Paris. So we would certainly see quite a mix of people there. And in the early years, particularly about 2006 onwards, when I was first participating as a judge and as a mediator, we would sometimes be a judge, sometimes be a mediator, and sometimes we were just observing the development of the component parts of the competition as it unfolded. So you would see people from different origin and cultures handling mediations in very different ways, fundamentally with a similar sort of plan, but somehow different. You know, it was the same but different. But I haven't worked together with another mediator from another language group and culture mediating a case. I haven't done that, no. Co-mediations with people who are in the process of developing a mediation practice, I've done, but not the sort of process you've described. I think that there's a great deal to be said for it, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very good idea. And you'll find that different people explain things in very different ways, and they elicit very different reactions from people simply because of their way of being.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, I had a very interesting experience, an extreme experience, because we ran a mediation session with Chavantes, some Indians of Amazonia in Brazil. And the village had 700 people, only 3 spoke Portuguese, all the others only speak the Indian language. So we did the whole process with 2 panels, two sheets of paper, where one was registered in the language and the other was registered in our language. And in some ways, this was very well accepted, because we put the 2 languages at the same level. And this was one of the issues. Plus, before getting there, we sent one of our researchers of the team, and she was with them for a long time. She understood their culture. So the starting of the mediation session was all in the ways someone come to the village, visit them. You have to leave the oldest ones talk first, and then we begin talking about the issue. You present yourself. There are all a certain ritual that you have to follow, not to be unpolite. And then we can start the session. And it was a very interesting and a very challenging experience. It worked.
That's fascinating. Can I just say, as an example, I've done nothing as ambitious and difficult as that, I must say, to be perfectly honest. But for example, if you were mediating a dispute between, let's say, without being too specific, Western Europeans and a group of Japanese, say, if there's a group of Japanese, then you would have to look carefully to see, because the Japanese culture generally pays a lot of deference to age and seniority. So the best thing to do is to introduce yourself, to ensure that you're introduced to the most senior person there, who generally, regardless of titles, is usually the oldest person in the room. So, and unless that's done, the relationships are not set well at the beginning. So it's an interesting observation I've seen reflected in a commercial practice, but I haven't done anything quite like that. Showing respect for people like that in that way, and actually understanding more of what is going on and the way they are, the problems they have and their culture and what their difficulties, and that business about two languages being given equal status so that you can negotiate on the same base. That's very intriguing, very interesting.
Thank you very much. Does anyone want to pose another question to our guest? Ah, Ursula. Yeah, I thought you had forgotten the key.
No.
The hand up. So yes, Ursula.
No, I just wanted to do two quick remarks as to the co-mediation thing, for example, between Leah and me. What is super important is that you get along very well with each other. You really have to know each other very well, and you have to like the style somehow, yeah, because what we feel very agreeable, I guess, Leah, is that if one of us is on stage, the other is 100% supporting. Because when you as a co-mediator start to think, this is wrong, it's bad. That is one thing. And the second thing, I've been a judge in the ICC competition also for years. And this is a very strict model, yeah, of mediation. What we do, Leah and me, is the non-recipe tailor-made complex process design, which is adaptive during time. So it's not really comparable, I guess.
Very well. This was more of a comment, right, Ursula? So I would just have another question if no one else there's, which has to do with your experience as a mediator. Of course, that's why you are here and the reason for all the presentation. So, but now because dominantly not all of us, and we're quite a mixed team in terms of professional origin, and also the work that we do is different. Some are mediators, some are lawyers, some are professors from other fields. So, but in any case, I would like to know, what is there a group of situations that for you it's harder to mediate, and others that you feel are easier? It all depends on several factors, but from your experience, what could you say about types of disputes that are more prone to easier mediation and the ones that are much more difficult to get there, if you get there?
I think that mediations which are conducted against the background of an established business relationship have better prospects of success. So, for example, if to take the sort of work that we do, or my colleagues do within our chambers, or we do within our law firm, if it's a dispute between an owner of a ship, let's say, and a charter of a ship, if they have a long relationship where they're owning and chartering a number of vessels, because there's a commitment to an ongoing relationship, those things are, okay, they're problematic because there are disputes. But the fact that there's a relationship that lies behind it often makes the matter, this is a sweeping generalization, you understand, easier to solve. If these are one-off disputes, a single incident of something where the parties are very remote and have no real interest in seeing each other after the problem is solved, broadly, I've found that harder, I think, because they have less investment in maintaining a relationship that lies behind the problem, I think. As to the character of the disputes themselves, really the whole range of work in the maritime field seems to be amenable to resolution by mediation. It used to be said in London, well, 10 or 15 years ago, maybe, that mediation wasn't suited to certain categories of dispute. For example, it was said, it's not suited to personal injury disputes, say. We had people that were quite vehement about that. And we found, and our senior judiciary who've observed this in practice generally will reflect this view, that it's pretty applicable to across a very wide range. I mean, some might be more difficult than others, and I can understand those where there's an emotional investment, like an injury, a physical injury, or even a death. Those I understand they have their own problems. But broadly, the full range of disputes in the maritime field broadly are amenable in some way or other to mediations. Those with relationships and the parties are tied together in some way are probably easier because they've got an investment in each other.
Very well. Very well. Thank
So-
you very much. It just confirmed some of our some of our not findings, but our basis for the
I've got
project.
a listing of all of the types of case that we've handled through our chambers, that's CEMediation chambers. Would you like me to send you that as a generic anonymized listing of case types? Because
Perfect.
that
We
will
could-
then enable you to, it's just like a washing list, you know? But, and it doesn't deal with any of the dispute, the detail behind them, or as I say, they're anonymized, but it gives you an idea of the range and extent of the sort of work that is susceptible to and works in this process.
That would be wonderful, because we also tried under the project. Now I can talk a little bit about it.
Sure.
We also tried, and we have also a list of disputes that could be settled through, but more at theoretical list. So it would be great if we could just screen them one against the other and see if it checks. It would be most valuable to the project, and for us it will be most welcomed. I can only tell you that, as all your help has been so far. So please send it to us, and then we'll also share our list with you, and then we'll continue talking on these issues. This is really relevant for us. I think Stian had a question. Stian?
Well, I actually lowered my hand afterwards, since this was a more interesting topic. We're going to need that list, that's for sure. But I just found it interesting the way you described your your people skills, your approach as a mediator as kind of a craft. You're a craftsman in knowing people, in creating trust. And it sounds like something which is acquired through experience. You mentioned that you observed for the first time, or the first times. Whereas we are going to conduct some trainings, which are kind of more in isolated settings. Do you have any advice for us how to sort of speed up the maturing of the people and trust skills a mediator needs?
No, that's an interesting question. Some of the things about mediation and mediators are to be found in not so much in people's intellect, because one assumes that they're capable of dealing with the intellectual difficulty of the problems, but it is to be found in people's character and experience. And it's very difficult to substitute character and experience by training, although I understand, you can describe the things that need to be developed. Before I gave this talk, I was talking to Victoria, who has assisted me in putting this together and forming the presentation. And we were going back over the slides, and I was saying I couldn't have given a talk like this when I was 25, because a lot of what's informed the talk, although it's founded on the intellectual workings of Lewis and others, is to be founded in experience in dealing with people in all sorts of places. We've prepared a graphic here, and I listed out all of the places on the globe, mainly by cities and incidents and casualties, that I dealt with over 40 years, and it's across a huge range. So I think that experience and contact with people in a variety of settings, there's almost no substitute for that. Now, how would you go about training for those things? Well, the broad parameters you can see in the sort of description I've given. Lewis's book, to be honest, is, I'm not holding this up as a sort of Bible and yardstick by which all of these things should be done, but it's a fascinating description. He's worked in the management of businesses all around the world, and has distilled from that expertise. So it's using someone else's experience and expertise, a sort of a synthesis of these ideas. And that's a useful training device. In fact, the organization I did my cultural training with used Lewis's book to set the broad parameters and then gave that to us, which we were to read. So something like that. There are training manuals like that. That book is good, although quite long. So I think experience is really the only way, but you can't get that experience in a short space of time. I think that the books like Lewis's and others are invaluable to set the foundations for that kind of training.
Thank you very much. There's also a good indication for the realizations and the outputs under the project, how to try to, as Tian put it now, how to speed up a bit the maturity and this craft of mediation, because one of the purposes of the project is indeed to develop a curricula that it's, of course, not only theoretical, but also practical on maritime mediation. Therefore, we need to be the best that we can be in giving good pointers to the students and professionals that want to learn from us and learn from you, RHYS. This was really a learning experience and a very pleasant one for everyone involved, I am sure. We were discussing that, and indeed, I think all the persons that are here now in this workshop really benefited from it. So, RHYS, thank you very much.
May I just add one
yes.
thing? You've made me think about one thing. I think there's a useful apprenticeship to be had in any learning and any organization. The sort of apprenticeship that I served doing the mediation, I did a mediation training course, and then I sat beside mediators over a period of time so I could, even if it wasn't explained as a method, I could observe it in practice. So that exercise of having observers, even if they're non-participants, is very valuable. So if you have mediators that you want to bring on and advance their understanding and behaviors in these sorts of ways, you can explain these things to them, but if they actually see it in action, their learning is accelerated. And that's the reason why it's done. So even if people become quite experienced as mediators, it's still worth their while attending and participating with others who are different, with different styles, different languages, different cultures, in order to learn more. I think observation, you learn a great deal from observation, and more from participation, of course, but observation is really valuable.
Thank you very much. Again, useful information and useful indications for the project. I don't know if everyone is aware already, maybe not, although it's in our website. We plan on, and we are preparing an online course on mediation, maritime mediation, and an intensive course on maritime mediation. I will talk a bit more about this to the end, but we also will have some apprenticeships that will be done under the supervision of LIA, which, as I said already, and as you've seen, it's an experienced mediator. So keep posted on news on the project, and soon we will have all of this to offer to everyone that is interested in these issues. Thank you, RHYS, again. I will, if you do you want to add anything or not? It's that. Thank you very much. So we will move on to the rest of the workshop. So RHYS, if you want to stay with us, you are
I'll take my leave if I may, but I should like to thank you very kindly for this invitation. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I hope the talk is interesting. I hope it's useful. I hope the material I sent you is useful to others.
It was, for sure, for us and for the public and for all the ones that we try to reach within the scope of the project, for sure. So thank you again, Mr. RHYS. And we will move on now to a bit of the presentation of the project and
Very good.
also of some of the outputs that are being done. Thank you very
Very good.
much.
I'll take my leave. Goodbye.
Thank you. So indeed, this was, I think, a wonderful start to this workshop, but now we will continue with the rest of the program for this afternoon. And we have some of the people engaged in the project here in the screen. We have more that are in the public. We asked them to come, but they are a bit afraid to appear on screen. But for the ones that weren't here in the beginning, so we have Professor CÁTIA CEBOLA from IPL Leiria. We have, well, I'm saying it as it appears on my screen. On my right, we have Roberta, the scholarship holder from Coimbra. I am Dulce Lopes, also from Coimbra. We have LIA VASCONCELOS from MARE, Lisbon, and we have TORGEIR with the, oh, both of them have glasses. Okay. TORGEIR, the one with the beard, and Stian on the other side. And Stian says where they come from, NTNU, some funds for something, so social research, it's social research, from Trondheim, Norway. And we have Ursula, as you all heard, she's Portuguese and German, and she's also a very experienced mediator, and she's contributing also to the project, mostly regarding the curricula on mediation. So this is part of the team. We have more, they are scattered, but for the purposes of the presentation, we are more than enough. So I will give the floor to Lia and Ursula. They will continue this part. And yeah, you can put them as co-hosts. Lia is already there. Okay. And then we can.
Can you see it?
Yes. Yes, you just have to change the.
What?
We can see it as if I was presenting. So you have to change the screen so it appears in full screen.
But it's in full screen. Ah, maybe not because I'm operating with two. Wait a minute. This is always a problem.
It happens frequently.
Lia, in the definitions of the monitor.
I'm going to try. Let's see.
Put again in the yeah, okay.
Let's try again.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Now can you see it?
We see all of the slides.
Yes. Now let me put it incorrect in a slideshow.
Yeah.
If you can see it. And now?
Now
no?
You should go to the definitions in
definitions. Where do we have the definitions?
Above at the inside yes, yeah.
Definitions, yes.
Yes.
Trocar de monitores.
Yeah.
E agora?
You have, yeah, perfect.
Now it's okay.
Don't change it.
Thank you. This technology always makes me.
We are mediators. We can help it.
This is not my land or my sea. Anyway, good afternoon to everybody. This project was mediated by me, coordinated by me and Ursula Caser. And before getting here, I would like to let you know how did we get here, because we probably, we have already more than 30 years of experience. And it's true, this is about dealing fundamentally with people, like the previous speaker said. And I will say, I will add something like for contributing to transform constructively and positively society. This is the idea. And when we started, me and Ursi, we started with Agenda 21st. And for a long time, we did a lot of work on that. And then we had a lot of other projects, but there are two that were particularly paradigmatic. One was a neighborhood, a neighborhood that was called a critical neighborhood in Lisbon. I won't get to details, but the main issue here was a conflict, a big conflict between the residents and the municipality. The municipality wanted to tear down 2/3 of the neighborhood, and the residents didn't want. And the neighborhood became part of a program that was a program of our public administration from the Ministry of Land Use and Cities. And it was an experimental program supported by collaborative models to develop innovative urban public policies. And while working with that, we understood that conflict, contrary to what most technicians and experts think, can be an asset, because if it well framed, it can give you a lot of results. And in fact, we had results on that when nobody thought it could happen. And as soon as we understood that, because if you have a conflict, the participants are already one step ahead, because they have gained social capital in the sense of networks and partnerships, intellectual capital in the sense of more knowledge, because you merge knowledge in the sessions and you create more knowledge, and also political capital in the sense that the group begins to be much more influential. So we decided, okay, let's apply for a situation where there is a conflict and you need to deal with the conflict. And we apply for the prize of Gulbenkian Ocean Area of Lisbon for the sustainable governance of the oceans in 2008. And with that, we start a project where there was a strong conflict between artisan fishermen and the manager of the natural park. That was a marine protected area that had been just created. Okay, so there was a conflict, and our proposal was to construct over the conflict and to acknowledge that conflict. That was something that was not being acknowledged, and people thought it was kind of pacified, but in fact it was there and they couldn't talk to each other. So when you have such a project, you have to define two things. You will have two types of the objectives. One that has the instrumental objectives, that are the plans, the actions, whatever, the products, something, the outputs. And the other are the social, to create trust among the participants, to put them working together, to co-construct stuff, and so on. These are the social ones. And even if the instrumental are very important for the results that the technicians, experts want, the social are very important if you want to turn society in a healthier society that can dialogue and come with new proposals. But in the meantime, you have also a lot of myths when you have a radicalization of a conflict. In this case, for example, there was conflicts that would return to our sessions that were, for example, with the fact if the currents on the coast were coming to the north of the south, because the fishermen were accused of killing the fish, and they would say, no, no, we don't, because the currents come to the north, and therefore it's the Sado estuary that is a estuary that has industry around. It's the pollution that kills the fish. And then the scientists will say, no, no, the currents go to the south, and you are the guilty ones. And this was something recurrent in our sessions. It's something like a small grain in your shoes that you cannot walk because of that. So we couldn't continue, and that had to be solved. So we invited, this is how we inject information in a project like that. We invited a person that was a specialist from one of our technical schools to explain how was the dynamic of the coast. And actually, both were right. During half of the year, the currents go north, half of the year go south. So both were right, and that thing was overcome, and we could follow on with the sessions. This is very important when there is a conflict. We involve a huge amount of people, as you can see from this, but our main focus was on the stakeholders and on an open forum that was kind of our spinal cord. The open forums were followed up by working meetings with the main key actors that were the fishermen and the manager of the park, some panels that where there was a very specific issue that would come from the collective agenda. We had to work with the specific actors, and sometimes it had to be with closed doors because there were very sensitive issues. For example, with the surveillance group that had around 8 institutions, entities, we had to put them together and discuss a couple of issues that were generating a lot of conflict because the legislation that each one of the entities were issuing were not compatible. And so they became aware of that and they corrected. And also we had public seminars to involve the public that want to know what was going on. And we even had an online interaction that I won't go on details, but we did that to overcome the shortage of the team and the need for involving at the early stage a wider group. So as you can see, we did explore realities, we inventory interest, and there are all these activities that went on during the 3 years of the project. The project were given to us in 2008, but in 2008 and 2009, we talked with the several entities, public administration, and so on, that we want to see on our open forums, and also the manager of the park and the fishermen. And then we start doing what is called the collective agenda. And the collective agenda should be not only the collective agenda of the decision and the technicians, but also the collective agenda of all participants that are going to be there. And that was we did. We identify the stakeholders, we interview them, and we set up a collective agenda that was fed during dual sessions we were having. So here are some views of what were the open forums. And as you can see, people worked actively and they had always a chance to also intervene. So there was sometimes during the whole process, some people that were from local association or other association that want to be heard would come to us and say, we want to talk to the people, we want to explain our situation. In the bottom part of that image, what you see is 2 persons, that one was from the Friends of Rábida, that is an association, a local association that was concerned because sand was being taken away from the beaches. And on the right side, you had the group of the divers with bottles that were forbidden to operate in the area. And we always gave a stage of 15 minutes for them to explain to the others this is the point of views, and then we went on our work. And here are some of the views that you can see. Then one of the things that we promised, and it was the main issue here, was to give them a co-management model, and that had to be constructed with all parts involved to contribute to more collective management of the marine protect area. And here you can see some of the things they worked in, and here they were doing exercise that how is the co-management today? How is the area managed, and what are the gaps that you can identify? And one of the co-management proposals that came out of this work were that you had the managers of the park, okay, that were on the top. Then we have a strategic council that had lots of different representatives from our public administration, from scientists, universities, representation, and so on. But there was a strong gap that was here on non-government organization tourism, so the ones that work locally. And one of the areas they identify were the areas of the fisheries that were the most important one. And this was an area that somehow was institutionalized. So by the end of the project, that was 2011, we still went on working with the core group of our open sessions because they request us to do it. And in 2014, the Institute of National Conservancy, that was the one that coordinated this protected area, invite this group to be the C group for being the consultant for the strategic council. This is how you institutionalize a group like this. What happened during the process? You create these three types of capital that I mentioned at the beginning: social, intellectual, and political, and that construct what we call the institutional capital, a new institution that was the C group that had a mandate and was representing the Strategic Council. So the C group operates since 2015 with a mandate. He is a consulting group for the Strategic Council of the Marine Park. So the C group construct this type of capitals, but what I want to tell you, what is important here is that there are all the stakeholders are represented, that there is a collective agenda, not only the agenda of the specialists of the decision makers. We treat equally all types of knowledge. This is very important for the results of mediation, because usually the people are very keen that only the technical scientific knowledge is the one that gives legitimacy to the solutions. That cannot happen in complex problems, because although it's important, you need other complementary knowledge to go and have adequate responses, and the co-construction of the whole process of co-management. So I finish giving you what Ostrom, the only woman that was given the Nobel Prize in Economy, said when she studied informal organization, collective organizations. Establishing trust and establishing a sense of community are mechanisms for solving the problem of supplying new institutions. So mediation can be a way to get there. So remember, as the first speaker said, he enunciate the whole things that we have to be concerned. We have to respect people. They have to set up their own dynamics. And if you just do your work, that is to assure they are in a safe space and they can all defy whatever assumptions are on the ground, you'll get somewhere, and they can overcome the conflicts and construct something that is positive and can be useful for the following up. So this is what I'm here, and Ursula is here also to answer your questions. So she was along the whole process, and all this was very challenging for both of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Ursula, because this was a shared endeavor and a one-woman show, but the two women working behind it, right? And other people too. So I would ask a question if no one else has another one, which is a comment question. We are, maybe for the ones that are not as used to mediation as we are, one thinks of mediation as something that that occurs at closed doors and is very secret or confidential. This is one of the watermarks of mediation, no? When we say it's confidential process. So, and you just went us through took us through a road where you had lots of debates and public sessions. So how did you cope with that and the confidentiality issue that, as you said, sometimes there were sensitive questions being posed or discussions taking place? How do you deal with that? How did you think of this process to make it still a mediation process, but in some parts open, no? Because this had to do also with public interest. So How did you deal with that? It must have been hard, Leah and Ursula.
I think Ursi is the best to respond to that.
It's not so easy. People are different, obviously. Yeah, and I think we have a lot of experience, but we think we have seen it all, but it's not like that. The people are always ready for a surprise, and sometimes it's just keeping the things together. Yeah, I remember this this meeting, this session where suddenly everybody shouted because there was somebody who did this impulse, or who was invited to do this impulse for 10 minutes or so. And we saw when he came, it was 54 slides. So it was clear, yeah, that it was not like possible in 10 minutes. And then he started, and after 10 minutes, we tried to signalize. And then after 15 minutes, we said, we have to stop. And then what happened, what the worst thing is, what can happen is the auditorium said, let him talk. We want to hear what he's saying. But obviously we had to stop because this would compromise all the session. Yeah. So this was we could stop him then, obviously, but it was a moment where all the content was not important. It was just important to keep track on the methodology, on the session, to do not lose control of the process in front of all participants, for example. Yeah.
That is very difficult for both of you are mediators, and we could see also from the speech from Mr. RHYS that it is something that you really need to practice and have a strong but yet sensitive hand. How do you deal with that?
Well, in this case, it was not a sensitive hand, in fact. Well, I think the trick is to get a good balance, or to find the right balance between empathy and assertivity in each single moment of the mediation process, yeah, or of the session process, or whatever it is. Because we always talk about active listening and empathy and all these type of things, but there are situations where you cannot be empathic. Yeah, you have to be assertive, because if not, you lose the control of the process, and you have to bang on the table and say, "Now, I'm the one who is leading here this session." Yeah, so I think that is the challenge, to find the right balance between empathy and assertivity, and not to be afraid in front of hierarchies, in front of important people, in front of social prestige, in front of money, or whatever power facts participants might have.
I want to add something, can I? So me and Ursi, we already did more than 400 sessions. So this is a lot, and you begin having somehow ways to deal with different situations. This was an open forum. Open forums were open to everybody that wanted to be there. There was no restriction, okay? And there you have different perspectives, different parts, different interests, all together in one room. That was probably, for me at least, but I think for UCILeR also, it was the worst session I had ever had, for several situations that I'm not going to details here. But one of them was that we usually had 30 people that already knew the rules, that had been with us in several ones, because this was a mediation of 3 years, and continuously, more or less, each 2 months there was a session. Okay, so people were used to the rules, and they were already functioning as in a correct way, let's say. And at that meeting, we had more 30 that had never been. They were very challenging against the marine protect area, because they refused to accept the rules, and they wanted to talk, and they were very afraid that we didn't give them the word. And so they had to learn that we gave the word to everybody. That was something they didn't know. And so the situation was really difficult. What do you do in a situation like that? Because you want to keep the transparency. To keep a transparency in a multi-part mediation, you need to open it to everybody. You just breathe, okay? And you go probably a little behind because we had a good situation before, and that was we were looking for the session, but unfortunately it didn't go as we want, and we restarted, and it worked. Yeah, but you have to be patient. You have to understand that the whole conflict that they are bringing to the session had nothing to do to you against you personally, and you have to put that in a space that they understand that the situation. I hope I explained.
Yes, you did very colorfully.
and perhaps appear more secure as you really are. Because we do not know what happened, what will happen in this situation, for example. But I know, for example, another situation of mediation where I had two men and one jumped up and said, if you say one word more, I beat you up completely. And the other one said, let's get out and solve the situation. So so you have to jump in strongly, but you don't know what, because I didn't know what I would when they really would go out. So I said, you sit down right away because this is not the process. So yeah, I think that's a trick also, to appear more safe and secure, and you know always what you are doing. That is the image, and that's the challenge.
Thank you. Stian, you have a question.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same question that I asked for Mr. Smith, Jones, something?
No,
Cliff, almost. It seems like you're describing situational management. Either you fake it till you make it, or you are experienced enough to appear secure and knowing how to, not being afraid of these situations. But still, either you have to be like a natural talent, or you have to acquire it through training and expertise or experience. How do you see the possibility for training someone to being a mediator without sort of feeling these situations in the first person?
Perhaps just I think you can, it's like piano playing. You can train it and learn it until a certain point. Yeah, but what you have to have as a personal profile is, I guess, at least you have to like to be on stage. And you have to, I always say jokingly, I love this profession because I love when everybody has to do what I want somehow. So this is a little bit the profile which you cannot, when you are afraid, it's very difficult to learn that. Yeah, so you have to have a sort of actor's profile, and then there's a lot of techniques to learn and a lot of experiences to make. Feel. And perhaps have colleagues like Leah, where when I'm at the end of my possibilities, because as you know, I'm German, yeah, if there's a huge room and everybody speaks like laterally, I get so nervous, you cannot imagine. And I say, please do not talk, the room is acoustically different, but I come to a point where I know I cannot stand it anymore. And then I make a point and I pass on to Leah. So this is also a good way out, to have somebody who can jump in when you are at the end with your possibility. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Does anyone from the public want to pose a question? So please, if you do, we will promote you to speaker. So don't be ashamed or afraid. It's, as you can see, this is a project with people that talk to people. So just pose the questions that you really want to. So, but if no one else has a question, then I will move on with the workshop. And after this example of what a mediation should be, in complex situations, because you will see that the project addresses many types of disputes. This is really a case with, as you could see, technical difficulties. No, you had to assert a technical issue beforehand so that you could move on with mediation. And then you had lots of actors, lots of interested persons. some of them, as here the question of authority was also raised, no? Some of them with different ways to look at themselves and that the relationship with others. So, and then you had the problem itself, which wasn't easy at all. No? Look, lots of years for mediation. We're just breaking here some of the assumptions on mediation. It's very quick. It's very swift. Well, we had a mediation that had to take time. Of course, you had funding. That was good, because I don't believe that anyone could handle a mediation for 3 years unless there was funding to do it, right? Because it will be, we are used to say that it's less costworthy than courts, but 3 years, it's quite a lot. So, but then after this great presentation, let's move on to TORGEIR here from NTNU Social Research, with the explanation of our first output of the project that is already available on our website. Okay, so you can, after the presentation, just go to the website, just scroll it down and just read it attentively if you're interested. But for the sake of the workshop and putting it out there, public, TORGEIR will do a small presentation on the taxonomy of maritime disputes. Thank you, TORGEIR. I give you the floor.
Yes, thank you very much.
Full screen. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, presentation mode. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I will do this presentation on behalf also of my colleagues Stian Antonsen and Kristine Størkersen, and also the rest of the project members who have participated, everybody into this, what I'm going to talk about now. So, and also I've borrowed some inspiration from Joachim Simplicio, who contributed to the project in an earlier previous workshop. So those of you who participated there might recognize a couple of points from his contributions. Yeah, so I'm going to present a taxonomy on maritime disputes, but a little bit of background first. Of course, there's a risk of repeating things that have already been said, but so conflicts and disputes are inherent to humankind, and there has always been disputes over territory, over interests, and over visions. And the maritime sector is no exception. So maritime disputes are very common, and at least from our perspective, now we're dealing with mediation. We see that these disputes are not always linked to rights and wrongs, but they are often rooted in different perspectives, and that can be economic perspectives, cultural perspectives, social perspectives, and of course always also legal perspectives. And in the maritime context, then, as 90% of traded goods are traded by the sea, and this makes the maritime transport a backbone of the global economy, and it says something about the scales are very large and the stakes are very high. So it's a very important issue then, what we're dealing with, I could say. And the maritime industry and the maritime domain is fairly complex with respect to all the different maritime activities taking place. Very many stakeholders. There are also lots of regulations on. There are laws, there are rules, there are codes, and all these regulations are connected to different regulatory bodies, from the top level international organizations and down to local states, local organizations. So it's a very, very complex domain. And yeah, what can be the sources of dispute? What can go wrong? And there's of course a lot of things that can be sources of disputes, and a few of those are mentioned here: fires, sinks, collisions, groundings, piracy. But these are only examples. There are so many things that disputes may rise over, and the consequences of these events then pollution, salvage programs, and wreck removal, financial guarantees, etc., etc., etc. So there is not a lack of issues over which there might be disputes. And that is, of course, also why there are so many disputes and conflicts in the maritime domain. So there are a lot of laws and rules and codes existing. So there's not a lack of those instruments. And if you take the IMO, there are more than 50 international conventions. And for example, only regarding pollution, there are 10 conventions only for that. But these conventions often take very long time to come into force. They take very long time to make amendments to, and not the least, they do not always reach all the states, and at least that takes long time to reach all the states. So they are not all encompassive, and also conflicts that take a long time to resolve and very costly to resolve in court, and only with reference to the laws and the codes, etc. So that is why we need also alternative methods for resolving conflicts. And happily, in the maritime domain, as in life as such, not only disputes are normal, but so is also cooperation. And so there's a long tradition for resolving disputes in the maritime domain, also with other means than the legal ones. So, as we've indicated, disputes are not so much about rights and wrongs as it is about different perspectives. And then what we have done with this taxonomy in this project is to try to support a mediation process that seeks to negotiate these different perspectives. And the taxonomy should be considered as a tool for describing and framing disputes and conflicts prior to mediation, as a preparatory step to decide upon a suited mediation strategy. So yeah, helping to frame the issue among the different parties. And of course, not all excuse me, not all the disputes may be suitable for mediation at all, and the parties need to understand the main characteristics of conflict to be able to even start a mediation process. So when applying this model, which I'm going to explain to you what consists of, it will most often be useful to start with landing on the general categorization of the specific dispute, and to put this at the center, and then establishing links to the actor landscape. We have the actors here on the table or on the figure to the left, and the dimensions of severity, which you can see on the right hand of this figure here. So to start off with the categories of dispute, which is not an exhaustive listing of categories of disputes, but it's an attempt to gather some main categories which many typical disputes will find a place within. So, for example, disputed relating to sharing of costs in case of sacrificing of cargo for a greater good. We group them under general average. You can see one of these green ovals here. Further, disputes among crews, they may have several different causes, but we group them together under crew relations, since they share this dimension of dispute. So, we listed up lots of other categories of disputes here relating to fishing quotas, to the environment, passengers, safety management, etc., etc. So it can be a good starting point, even just to frame what kind of issue are we dealing with here, and then after that, it will always be at least two parties in a dispute, but often there can be more. So the different categories of disputes can bring with them different types of actors, and obviously a mediation requires an overview over the actors involved, and also importantly knowledge about the actors' prior history of cooperation and conflict. We've put that on the far left-hand side in the standing rectangle there. I think also RHYS mentioned something about this, the relation between the parties, and interestingly, a good resource in dispute mediation can be the interest the parties have to maintain their relation also after this dispute. So that's I think it's an important point. And finally, then the severity of the dispute is an important parameter, and we've decomposed the severity category into four subtypes on the right-hand side here on the figure. So the first one, the upper one, is relates to the complexity of the dispute, in the sense that the actors and the issues involved are interconnected, making it harder to land on a joint understanding of the problem and to predict how the mediation process can play out. So getting a kind of a shared image regarding how complex is this issue is important in the starting phase. And the second category here is relates to impact. For instance, the stakes involved in terms of economy, environment, reputation, and societal consequences. So what kind of impact can this dispute have? Also an important parameter. Under that one, the third category of severity relates to the urgency of the dispute. Of course, some disputes are acute and in need of immediate resolution, while others allow for more time in the mediation process. And that also is an important parameter for framing the dispute in the starting point and planning for what kind of process one is heading for. And finally, the fourth one then is the effects of the dispute, and we classify them in terms of a long, long or short-term effects, and the potential the dispute have for escalation. Okay, so I will provide you with an example of how a dispute can be, mapped onto this taxonomy I just presented. And we're using an example from it was an incident in the summer last year where there was a Norwegian cruise line ship that hit a small iceberg outside the coast of Alaska. And I must rush to say that this incident was it didn't have many severe consequences, and so we've used it just to we built a little hypothetical scenario out of this case. So the three bullet points I'm going through now is just a hypothetical situation that could have risen from this incident. So that's important to say. So after hitting an iceberg, then it was we could imagine that the ship did actually, of course, head for the shore right after to check the damages and so. And it could be the case then that there was serious damage to the hull revealed in Seattle then where they went. So there could be large damages to the ship. And then what was the cause of the collision with the iceberg? Okay, it could be the case that there are ice monitoring services, and the ice monitoring services in that area, they had received information indicating a high risk of iceberg in the shipping lane, but unluckily there was a software failure leading to in one of their vendors software, leading to the situation that the ship and the ship owner did not receive the information about the icebergs in the shipping lane. So there has been a lack of communication with respect to a service that this ship has bought. Okay, so that brings another actor into this potential dispute, and all the delays for the ship led to that the passengers and the crew members, they missed their return flights home, which is maybe in the larger picture is not a serious consequence, but that represented economic costs for each of these individuals. So that is always also a source of a potential dispute here. So if we think about this this concrete potential or hypothetical event, we could try to use our taxonomy here to kind of frame the issue, and doing so, we would relate the passengers' costs associated with the delay to now we're looking into the green ovals in the middle of the figure here. So we relate them to provision of services and or to passengers. Any injuries appearing amongst the crew members could relate to the crew relations. Disputes relating to navigation issues and the reasons why the ship hit the iceberg. It could be directed towards the dispute category of safety management, if there were lack of compliance with the rules and procedures for navigation. Or it could be related to provision of services, taking into account the lack of information coming from the iceberg monitoring services. And then there's the costs of the fixing the ship, which would have to do with vessel expenses. So relating to which actors, which type of actors would be involved in such a dispute as we're talking about here. of course, the ship operator and the ship owner who was operating the ship. The passengers are a very obvious category of actors. The crew members as well, who have suffered also the same economic losses and also injuries. The insurance company of both the ship and the passengers would definitely want to have a say in this dispute, and then also the provider of the ice monitoring services and the vendors, the subcontractors of theirs. So we might already have a quite large gallery of actors potentially entering into disputes that might arise after this incident. So what could we say about the severity of a potential dispute from this incident? With respect to complexity, we could say that it's quite high complexity, since there are several actors and issues involved, and also it's at least at the point of departure here, it's a bit unclear maybe which actor bears the main responsibility for the costs involved. Regarding the impact, maybe not very high, not very low, medium impact, provided that the impacts are mostly economic and reputational, not any deaths, etc. Not very urgent dispute. The issues are mainly preventive or not preventive. The incident has already taken place, and we're talking more or less about compensatory measures. So medium urgency, and the effects are mostly short term, leading to a classification of the effect severity as low. So I very abruptly end my presentation here. I'm interested to hear your reactions to this work we've done on this taxonomy. I would have wished also that RHYS had been here as a experienced mediator, to have some, to have his comment to whether this can be a useful tool for framing a conflict or a dispute in an early phase maybe of mediation. But there are many other experienced people here, so I will just say thank you and leave the floor open to questions and comments and maybe even praise.
Thank you, TORGEIR. Thank you. Also, Stian is here. Christine could not be with us. Thank you to the team from the NTNU that prepared, of course, with the contributions of the other partners, but that mainly prepared this taxonomy of disputes that you can still see in the screen. So I would like to ask again if someone has any questions to pose. No? So I would maybe follow up with what TORGEIR just said. It's a pity that Mr. CLIFT is not here, but he's quite involved in the project now, so I'm sure we'll be able to discuss with him. And with everyone else who wishes to, just mail us, mail me, mail the project, and then we will get back to you. But indeed, this taxonomy, as you said at the end, TORGEIR, it is still to be seen how this can impact our mediation proposal. Kind of not that we are trying to do any kind of paradigm or whatever. We're trying just to be the most comprehensive that we can be when dealing with these issues. But the question remains, could we see this in a mediation, and at which moments could this be relevant for mediation? So could this be relevant for a mediation when the mediator prepares it? Yeah. So could you see that this would kind of be in the background of the mediator, just thinking this would be a structured way to prepare for the mediation? Could you see that this would help? We think it would, but now just to put it out there, would this be a relevant way to analyze the dispute and see where do I go from here? Now, as a mediator called upon to mediate this situation, what kind of tools do I use? Who do I call? Right? Who do I try to engage? How? So, TORGEIR, if you could just expand, or Stian is raising his hand. So you were both working on this. So any of you could reply.
Yeah, please, Stian, go ahead.
I see this in one way a little bit similar to what Mr. CLIFT was talking about. It seems like I can imagine only that when he was preparing for his mediation process, he was trying to read what kind of people will I be facing? Where are they coming from? How can I sort of prepare to engage with them socially, to know the codes and the norms, and not like being impolite and getting off on the wrong foot. I see this as quite similar, actually, not in terms of trying to understand the actors, but trying to understand the conflict complex and the phenomenon, just to know as much as you can about what is going to meet you in the mediation process. So like you say, Dulce, it's probably more as a preparatory tool than anything else. At least that would be my gut feeling.
Thank you, Stian. Thank you. Do you want to pose a question, Stian? You have hands raised. Maybe you would like to say something besides that, no? So Roberta, you can pose your question, please.
Oh, that's not a question. I would like to make a comment only that I have applied the taxonomy during the project, and it was very useful. So I thought it was very interesting. We fulfilled the taxonomy with a lot of examples. And during the whole process, the use of the taxonomy was great. So it was easy to use, and the actors, the categories, and the indicators, they were very easy to use, and very I'm looking for a better word instead of easy. It was very instructive. So it was very good. So just a testimonial, a little testimonial. Thank you,
Roberta. If any of the public is interested, as I said, we're going to open soon our on the 13th of March, I can even tell you that, our online course, for which you briefly will be able to register. It's free of charge. It's everything included in the project. And we also, within the online course, we do have some examples and also some situations that you can do your own at home while doing the online course. So you can also practice with this if you do decide to take our online course, which I strongly recommend, of course. So thank you, TORGEIR, thank you, Stian, and thank you to Christine. And if you could...
I think we have
Oh, we have one. Oh,
yes.
Good. Thank God. So Marta, can you promote to speaker or allow to talk? Marta. Hi, Marta.
Hello.
Hi. We cannot see you, but we can hear you. So you can start. Marta?
Marta, you have to open.
Hello. Sorry.
Marta.
Hello, my name is Marta. I'm a lawyer, a marine and transportation lawyer and insurance as well. So I've been working on these areas for about 20 years, 25 years. And I
Seem like that. It doesn't seem like that, Marta, at all. Don't say that. It's not true. But okay,
it is.
continue.
No, and really, I have already also participated in some arbitrations in London, and this is a matter which interests me a lot. And I was seeing, you know, the structure that you were building in, and I've got with a question, which may be an ignorance question, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay, so. What do you think about the urgency, if the urgency applies to mediation? Because from my understanding and from my experience, we don't have many mediation in Portugal, which is a pity, because we could be, you know, we could get all the PALOPS countries, and we could be here the place, not going to London. For example, I had one arbitration that was from a Portuguese company and a Spanish company. It was about a chartering and buying of a boat. And we all went to London for arbitration. And after 3 years, we decided that we wanted to try to solve it by mediation. And this because the costs were so high, so that at a certain point, and it was so specific, you know, it wasn't like discussing the case, the facts, but more discussing the legislation and the regulation. So we were, you know, not going straight to the facts, and the costs were really very high. And we finished with mediation, which was very interesting. But in London, okay, so Portugal could help in these cases. Nevertheless, from my understanding, mediation is not a thing that is very quickly, it's slower. And do you think that the urgency, we have some issues in marine cases and transportation cases, even now for, you know, the demurrage and things like that, that we really need to be quick? Do you think that mediation could be could apply or not so much?
Thank you, Marta. And we'll be in contact, Marta, because I can see you work in this field. Please leave us your email.
Okay.
And if you wish, of course.
Of course.
Mandatory. We're
Thank
talking
you.
about mediation, so let's just be clear about that. But it'd be lovely to be able to talk to you as even for one of our next workshops. Who knows? Because we can see you have lots of experience, and we really try to get the more we can in Portugal, mainly in our case, the more people we can that do know about the field, and there aren't that many, as you also said.
I know.
Perfect.
No, but it was very interesting, and when I've seen this workshop, I said I need to attend. Really, so it's mutual.
And we're happy that you're here, and we'll keep in contact. So just leave your email, send it to Roberta directly, and we'll be in contact. But in any case, I don't know, does anyone else want to respond? TORGEIR, do you think you wish to respond, or maybe KÁTIA?
Ursula
is raising her hand. Ursula.
This is to say that it can't be said right away like this, because there is no recipe, obviously. Mediation takes some time, yes, but I think everything starts also with a good clearing, a good clarification of the situation, whether it's mediable anyway, yeah, what is implied, which type of specialists, eventually experts you need, yeah, because the mediator would not decide anything for anybody, so there would be like a sort of check who has to be involved in an expert panel, who has to be involved from the juridic side. All these type of things would be to be clarified from the beginning. And then mediation does not fall from heaven and resolves everything for everybody in this wonderful win-win. It depends also what is the aim. Yeah, is the aim agreement, and the parties will not have to work or live or deal or whatever in the future together. This makes a different type of process than if you have a relationship which is already long-lasting, has a history, and will last. So this is just to say every case is a case, and sometimes hard hard consensus or a mediation work to find common interests and compatible interests, and then there is still a set of competitive interests which have to be decided by court, for example, can shorten a process very much, because then it's clear that the parties have some things in common and some things on which they might even not want to take responsibility of the decision. And if parties do not want to take responsibility of their decisions, it's not a case for mediation. Yeah, so this is always a question of analysis and to see which process is the right one. Yeah, I would say. But I would say that mediative talks, at least, or productive construction of a productive dialogue between everybody already can clarify a lot and help a lot, and in the end shorten the process.
I could add something which really goes to what Ursula just said. Again, we have to deconstruct what mediation is or could be, right? It doesn't really need to be a method or a methodology that solves everything and forever. Oh, it's normally not like that. And in terms of urgency, as you asked, it could be a way to find medium tempore solutions for the parties, no? That they do not kind of, it doesn't extinguish the dispute, it just recharacterizes it and just gives a solution for that urgent problem, without the parties saying, I'm not going to court, because they can go to court. But in the meanwhile, it's like a cautionary measure, but under agreement, because there are some cases, for instance, pollution ones, that the parties do want to settle on that, on how to do corrective measures quickly, but they don't want to jeopardize their chances of going to court. So mediation could have that, you know, that plus, which is the flexibility that they can agree and still move on with the main process. They can agree on small things, partial things, but nevertheless, they have a common ground on what is important and urgent at that point. So I think this is one of the good things that mediation can bring. Let's discuss this. Let's define the issue, as Ursula said. Let's work on this. All the rest will be done afterwards. If you want to go to court, you go to court. But at least, since this is an urgent matter, let's settle this now. Okay, so that would be, I think, a good prospect for mediation in some cases of maritime disputes.
No, it's interesting. I agree. It's very interesting. I didn't think about that, but it can be, well, it depends on the parties if they wish to do that. And sometimes it's not so easy. When you have ship operators and ship owners, it's not so easy.
That's why I gave the example of the pollution, because no one wants to be bad in the picture, no, to stay bad in the picture. So everyone, maybe they have the will to do something at that, and it works, and it could have a positive impact even in the relationship between the parties, but that is another thing, Marta.
And this is also a question of this famous partner. What is the best alternative? Is the best alternative to mediation? Yeah. But this is also something which can be clarified in mediative pre-mediation talks, yeah, to get that clear, or to help parties get that clear. What is their best alternative? Because if you have a very good alternative for negotiation and mediation, you never ever would opt for mediation. So the worse is the alternative, the more probable it is that mediation would come into the play as a possibility to solve parts or to start negotiating, whatever. Yeah. So
just a curiosity, Marta, because you said that you were the parties were in the arbitration court for 3 years, and then they tried mediation. And how much time do you spend in mediation?
You're not going to believe. Well, we had like 2 or 3 months preparing the mediation, but after preparing all the mediation, we went to London for about 1 week and we settled.
1 week. So
1
that's
week.
so.
Yes, but it was 1 week, like
After
8
3
o'clock in the
years,
morning
after
until
3
5
years, you-
o'clock in the afternoon. No lunch, nothing, you know.
So that to respond to your question, mediation can get more urgency in solving conflicts, because in 1 week you of course the preparation is time, but then I think it's quick, even when you have just 2 parties in the conflict. It can be longer, just as Margov was, because there are 1,800 people participating. No, Ursula, 1,800 people participating in Margov, so it's a lot of people. But when you have just 2 parties,
Well, we have
mediation
3
can
parts.
be
We have 3 parts because we have state parts involved as well, indirectly, yes.
of course.
But
But even though
yes. But yes, it's very small. It's almost, it's not collective. But the question
that
here was
justify mediation. Mediation is quickly, it's a very
no, but the case here was that everything was discussed and discussed and discussed in the arbitration. So we knew very well where the things were going, and they were not going on the right direction because they were so technical. You know, we were discussing, you know, things so technical. We weren't discussing anymore, you know, the selling of the boat and the charter party of the boat. So we were, you know, things that weren't documents. We were discussing documents at a certain point. That we were discussing things really very, very specific that we knew that we would take us so much long. And the economic part was also very important because they had already spent half of the ship, okay, half of the selling of the ship. So if this would go along, and this was very strong to get a mediation, and at a certain point we started thinking about that. And we started preparing, but really we had the arbitration discussion that was very helpful, you know, because we had exhausted
So
all.
maybe if it would have started with mediation, it would have been longer.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you, Marta. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Marta. That was really great. I don't know if TORGEIR and Stian want to add anything, or we could move on. No? So thank you, Marta, for
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on to, we're having the debate in the middle of the sessions, as you've already seen, against what is in the workshop program. So, but as you saw with CLIFT, Mr. CLIFT, we are not linear, at least in Portugal. So let's just be a bit flexible with the program. Now it's me and Roberta will do our presentation. We'll try to be quick because we are already slipping on time. So Roberta, I'll ask you to, and our presentation just covers a bit of what was said. So I will start, and then Roberta will talk a bit about another of the activities of the project that went on, and now we are finalizing the closing report on the interviews we had on maritime mediation that will soon be available on the website. So I'm just presenting new outputs that you will soon be able to grasp. So
is it okay? Is it working?
it is okay. It's working, Roberta. Thank you. Since it's a shared presentation, Roberta will click on the PowerPoint. So we are going to talk a bit about mediation traits. What is mediation in particularly regarding with maritime mediation, which is the subject of the project. You can click. So as you see, the ocean is sometimes the origin, sometimes the seat, which is quite complicated if you talk about the seat in the ocean. But in any case, it's a locus for many relationships, contracts, and consequently disputes. As you could see from the taxonomy and for TORGEIR's presentation, we listed in the project some of the disputes that are occurring with more frequency and have the oceans and the seas as their locus standi, where they do take place or they are involved or related to. So, and some have been talked about here, We talked about hull damage claims, charter party disputes, cargo, but we have other bunker disputes, insurance contracts, personal injury risk. CLIFT talked about how before it was thought that personal injury could not be subject to mediation, but nowadays it is commonly accepted that it can, because the idea of what can you what is transition, what is available for the autonomy is this has changed a lot all over the past years. So, and we have others. Roberta, you can skip it. Work-related issues, cruise passenger, as you could see from TORGEIR's example, fishing quota, pollution issues, as I've just mentioned, use of sea for recreational purposes. This is also this question of domain and use of a shared resource, and also the use of sea for economic purposes. This has been something that has been nowadays more up to date with energy, even nuclear energy and platforms, not only the oil drilling, but other situations where there is the need to maybe try to see if there is a compatibility of uses. And of course, this raises disputes and raises questions on how to find an equilibrium, and mediation is purposeful, a method that tries to find equitable solutions that may have enduring effects. So you can continue. Also, you could see that maritime disputes have an intrinsic international nature. It doesn't mean that it cannot be national, of course, if we are in territorial waters and there's disputes between I don't know, fishermen and ship owners, naturally could frame them as national, but most of them have international nature. They normally happen overseas. They have different parties, foreign parties, or parties with different nationalities and residences or seats. The place of contract, even in some cases, could be disputed with the generalization of online forms of contracting with parties that do not know each other. And also, it is very common, and this is the basis of it all, that place of loading and discharge of products, of passengers, is different everywhere. So all these international elements in a maritime dispute leads to possible conflicts of law and concurrence of multiple jurisdictions. We won't go into that, but maybe, as Marta said, this is one of the reasons why so far arbitration is so popular, no? Because indeed there is, again, more flexibility in normative contexts, but mediation always also gives us that in terms of how to frame a dispute even more, I believe, than what arbitration does. There are also, as TORGEIR mentioned, several international treaties on the matter, codes of conduct, that we could talk even of a lex maritima, of a law applied mostly in what regards commercial relationships to these maritime situations. But this is a legislation that is very scattered, complex, hard to apply. So, and above all, maritime disputes, and this was all confirmed by the presentation so far, is also of a specialized nature, involving actors and demands linked to several, I would say again, nature, and that do kind of extrapolate from what we usually know as lawyers, even as mediators. There are some specificities that do relate to these areas and that need some to be considered while going to maritime mediation. We will see that, for instance, we have a case, the one we will show at the end from the game we are preparing, that has to do with that. It's not purely a contract, because there are, it's a contract, but there can be maritime contract, but there can be some situations where international obligations at sea could impact on that contract and maybe justify or at least amenize unfulfillment of the contract. So you need to be aware of these specificities while conducting business at sea or while enjoying yourself at sea. Okay, so that is important to say. You can go on. So possible means of solving disputes. I think everyone here is aware. Litigation, normal international litigation for what I just said, arbitration, which has been, for my knowledge and studies, one of the practically in practice preferred methods in these disputes, and mediation, of course, that is going a bit, as I said in the beginning, is being granted more and more attention every year. And other alternative dispute resolution mechanisms also. Just to give you a hint, podes passar, Roberta, just to give you a hint, we have a specific example of ADR in Portugal, which is quite interesting because we could try to frame it as mediation, but it's something somewhat different because the nowadays legislation in Portugal makes mediation a voluntary mechanism, and in which the parties, one of the elements of autonomy is that the parties select the mediator. Okay? Of course, there are possibilities. If they don't reach an agreement, they could go to this and that. But in principle, this is one of the elements that are essential to mediation, at least in Portugal. But we had in the maritime field a law that is already from 86 that recognized, before we even were discussing mediation as something as serious, that recognized that there should be, that first there were maritime tribunals because the specificities were a lot. So we have a specific order of tribunals to address maritime issues, most of maritime issues. And then there were in many areas, as the ones that I put there, simplified, removal of wreckage, civil liability arising from pollution of the sea, ownership and possession of wrecks, prey, well, all of this, that there would be a pre-judicial mandatory conciliation. The name is conciliation. And it would be conducted, this is an element, first, it's mandatory, and second, you have the conciliator prescribed by law, which is the captain of the port. So before going to court, there is the need to do a procedure, which is described as one of conciliatory nature. But it's very similar in terms of how it works with mediation. The legal action can only be pursued after this conciliation is attempted and there's a certificate that it didn't go well, okay? It didn't reach the agreement that was envisaged, if we could say so. Keep it go on. So just to say that indeed there are, even in the Portuguese legislation, indications that maybe mediation is interesting. But also there is the counterpart. Now, we had one captain of the port in our interviews, Roberta will talk about the other ones, that said, well, I don't believe mediation is very important because we have this pre-conciliation. No, we have this pre-conciliation. So many cases come to me anyway, and I mediate them. He called it mediation. So it's interesting also to see the specificities in legislation that lead us to more open space to mediation or less open space to mediation. But in any case, there are advantages of resorting to mediation. The parties decide consensual. If they do decide, they can decide not to agree. The parties are in control of the process, even in terms of legal framework. They have a big autonomy area where they can say, well, let's apply this one and not that one, as long, of course, as there is no mandatoriness, and this, let's not go into this, but indeed there is not flexibility to adopt and adapt a situation. Confidentiality, we've talked about this, which for commercial purposes, well, it's the secret of the business sometimes. Parties usually split costs, which is also, well, we heard Marta talk about costs. And so it's something that also is relevant while envisaging a method to solve a dispute. Since the parties agree on the decision, there is usually no need for enforcement, usually. No, because maybe the parties also had an agreement before and they did not fulfill it, right? So this is just what the doctrine says. But in any case, there are examples that this easy enforcement, even in case of breach of contract or breach, in this case of the mediation agreement, could lead to an easier enforceability, such as is established under the Singapore Convention. Okay, well, not that many parties yet, but maybe it will grow. Also, mediation tends to restore, to heal conflictuous relationships and maintain the ones that were healthy. Okay, that were healthy. What are the main pitfalls? Roberta, you can change. Well, of course, the technicalities. That's why we try to disaggregate this into the taxonomy, to make it clearer how it could be done, even in situations that had multi-parties, that interconnect public and private fields. Well, Marta just said, well, we had a public actor there indirectly, but it's always a nuisance, but it happens a lot. Okay? It happens a lot. And it could be one or it could be two, a regulatory authority, as TORGEIR mentioned, the state. So it could be a big deal. And then we have also, and this is what the project tries to address, the lack of expert mediators in the maritime field, at least in some countries such as Portugal. This is a reality. We just confirmed it from someone in the field. And we are trying to address through this project, this situation, by what? By trying to develop curricula for maritime mediation, not purely academic curricula. That is not our purpose, although many of us come from universities, but we also have a bunch of mediators, researchers that to help us on this, to make this really a positive endeavor for everyone, and to give the best indications possible if anyone wishes to engage in the future in maritime mediation. So from my part, this is all. I thank you, and I give the word to Roberta to continue the presentation.
Okay, now that I want, it doesn't move. Okay, I'm going to briefly talk about the interviews and the interview report we are almost done producing. The interviews were conducted in Norway and in Portugal during the months of October and November of last year. And after that, we started gathering all the data and starting to produce first reports from each of the institutions, and now a global report with all the findings. So this report will serve as a basis for drafting a maritime mediation curriculum. And the interview was conducted in 4 fronts. In Portugal, it was conducted by the University of Coimbra Legal Institute, from the Polytechnic Institute of Leiria, and from the Nova University of Lisboa. In Norway, the team from NTNU with Minerva Consulting conducted the interviews. There were 19 interviewees in Portugal and 10 in Norway. And we chose several areas of expertise to have very different points of views and, from their backgrounds. So we had lawyers, we had people from insurance area, from fisheries, and within fisheries, we had from very different areas. So owners of fishing boat, from boat owners. We had from aquaculture sector, we had port administration, we had port captain, the one that was going to conduct a mediation. We had governmental members, including one from an environmental agency. We had ship brokers. We had members from the academia and consultants. We had one maritime mediator and also a historian researcher. So that was, several different backgrounds. So what points we addressed during the interview? And I'm not going to address all of them because our focus here is going to be on mediation, but we had 9 questions. And first we started with questioning each interviewee about their personal experience with mediation, to know, from their background and everything they went through, if they had any experience, and what was their attitude towards mediation, if they thought mediation was acceptable, if they thought it was positive. Then we went through the interviewee's thoughts regarding the suitability for mediation, and in this point is what I'm going to go through in the next slides, so I'm not going to detail right now. Then we moved to interviewee's thoughts regarding the necessary skills for a mediator. In that, we entered into, there were 2 different questions. First, we had an open questions for them to point what they thought was important. And then we had an open question with a scale from 1 to 5, being 1 unimportant and 5 very important, with skills such as neutrality, confidence building skills, assertivity, negotiation skills, informing the parties during the process, being settlement oriented, being reconciliation oriented. So they would grade these skills to know what was important for a mediator to have. Then we had a question about the mediator's preparation. What was important? What if a mediator's preparation was important for certain situations? For example, to decide whether the mediator himself was the right person to solve one specific conflict, to set up a competent team of mediators in case of a complex conflict. So they graded that also on a scale from 1 to 5. And so we had, a chart with all these grades from all the interviewees. And the last questions was regarding the education for maritime mediators. If they thought an education was important, what they thought was important regarding the curricula. So that was everything we questioned them. So what were our findings regarding mediation? Regarding the interviewees' personal experience with mediation, most of the interviewees are favorable to mediation. That was unquestionable. We had 2 of them which did not have a very positive attitude. One said he couldn't answer favorably because he wouldn't answer to an abstract situation. So he would need to, know the specific concrete case to give, one specific opinion. And the other one said in public affairs, he works at a port. He wouldn't, he thought it wasn't very favorable because when dealt with public money, it could be dangerous, could lead to corruption. So those were the positions we found more interesting. Regarding experience, in Portugal, we found very little experience with maritime mediation, although sometimes they called maritime mediation another form of ADR, like this conciliation Dr. Dulce just mentioned, and sometimes they just used negotiation for maritime affairs, and they said that not in specific way, saying we do negotiation. they would say things like, oh, we call someone that knows the parties to help with the to help us with the solution of that situation. So we saw that the mechanisms were used, but not specifically mediation. So the experience was mostly in the sectors of fisheries, labor, and insurance. So their attitude was very positive. Or sometimes it was acceptable, but mostly they were positive. So what are their thoughts regarding suitability for mediation? As I mentioned, for this question, we had two types of questions. One was open, in which the interviewees answered what types of maritime disputes they understood could be solved by mediation. And for that, it was a free answer. So they presented several answers, such as fisheries conflicts, so conflicts among fishermen, conflicts at the port, collision among ships, conflicts between ships and crew members, recreational boating, maritime contracts, rescue, collusion, maritime insurance, and grounding. And for the second round of questions, which was the closed one, we had a list, and some of the conflicts listed were the ones that Dr. Dulce mentioned before. So it was cargo, shipbuilding contracts, bunker, claims regarding the crews, marine pollution, work conditions at sea, safety issues, fishing quotas. So we read that, and they were supposed to grade from 1 to 5, being 1 unsuitable to mediation and 5 strongly suitable to mediation. And with that, we had a very wide range of answers. So we couldn't reach, one. We couldn't say, this was seen as suitable from all of them, and this was seen as unsuitable. We can't reach one specific conclusion. And the reasons might be because of their different backgrounds, since we got a very wide range of professions and different backgrounds. They understood things in different ways. So the next question was regarding the characteristics of the disputes. The example of the questions. We got questions such as parties having a history of cooperation and successful joint problems. On a scale to 1 to 5, do you think that would be unsuitable or suitable or strongly suitable from 1 to 5 for mediation? And then they would answer that. For that question, most interviewees thought all the characteristics were very positive, except in specific cases when they had an understanding and explained them. So they saw one specific situation in a very specific way. I said specific twice. For example, the parties have a history of cooperation and successful joint problem solving, or the parties' desire for settlement was very high. In such situations, people who gave low grades understood that since the parties already were very close to reaching a settlement, mediation was not needed. So they could solve the issue in an even straighter or easier means other than negotiation, such as a direct negotiation. So this was mostly what we found in the interviews. We're going to have a full report soon. So thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. Yes, we will very soon, probably even this week, we will load the report online in our website, mediare.eu. So medimare.eu, so it's quite easy to remember. I don't know if anyone wants to ask a question. Marta, you're in the screen. Do you want to ask a question? Marta is part of the team already. She's already.
No, I'm not. I didn't know if I should leave the screen, so I thought it was respectable to leave it. Just that. It's very interesting. It's really very interesting, and we can have many things to discuss, but we will have time.
We will. So this was, if anyone wants to pose a question on a specific issue, I think this was more of a forming up of the project, right? So the interviews were conducted to give us some more knowledge on the field from several actors. As Roberta put it, we try to reach everyone and see what their thoughts on mediation in the maritime field was. So this is something, as I said, that will be available for consultation. So just do it and then just reach back to us to see if you have some doubts. Of course, everything is anonymized, but we have a listing of the main responses aggregated by professions and also by country. Okay, well, let's then move on, because here there was no debate. So now we move on to Katja for the last presentation. Then we have a final part, but Katja, you could start from now.
Thank you, Dulce. I think you already are seeing my screen, yeah?
Yep.
So good afternoon, and thank you to all who are here to know more about the MEDIMARE project. And I also want to thank to all the partners of the project, because it has been an enormous opportunity to learn more about this subject. And special to Dulce, because it's leading this project in such a splendid way. So thank you so much. And well, being the last one is indeed more difficult than easy, because I think everything is already be said, and the previous presentations were really good. But I think I will make more a kind of summary than anything else. Well, my presentation will be about Maritime Mediator and about the skills of Maritime Mediator, and I will analyze in one hand the ethical principles and the demands that the ethical principles put to the Maritime Mediator, and also analyze the practical skills of a mediator. Well, and as I said before, just a summary of already is being said today here in this workshop. So starting by the ethical principles of Maritime Mediator, and specifically began with the principle of confidentiality, that is one of the most important principles of mediation, and we already talk about that today. It's so important that legally can only be excluded in very exceptional situations. Well, when we are talking about environmental or maritime disputes, confidentiality may raise specific problems, in particular when the conflict involves many parties, such an example, for instance, an oil leak at sea that can involve several states, that can involve citizens, that can involve environment association, protection associations. So we have a multi-party conflict, and when are involving too many parties, it may be difficult to ensure that information is confidential, as Ursula has told us before. And on the other hand, as in this type of conflict, often the public interest is involved. There is information that has to be shared with society in general. So in maritime mediation, there may be different levels of confidentiality. There must be some facts that everyone should know. There are facts that just some of the parties should know, and then can have the mediator can have to deal with total confidential facts, because one party can tell the mediator, this fact you can talk with anyone else in the mediation. So it's up to the mediator or team of mediators to manage in a very careful and responsible way the different levels of confidentiality. And so the mediator should have planning skills to manage the confidentiality in a maritime mediation, and it has to be very responsible when we are talking about this principle. Another important principle is the equality principle that requires an equal treatment of those involved in a mediation, either from a legal or operational point of view. So if we have a multi-party mediation with different stakeholders, it can be difficult to guarantee at least the feeling that everyone is equal in the negotiation table, especially when we have a government representative or a public administration representative, or even a company with very high economic power. Because if we also have fishermen or citizens, and they feel that they don't have the same power, it can be difficult to the maritime mediation manage that feeling that there are some parties who have more power than others. So again, special process management tools will be needed to ensure that all parties feel equal possibilities in the mediation. Related with the equality principle, we also have the impartiality principle that implies, for instance, that the mediator does not take the side of one of the parties. He must not be guided by sympathies. He always have to be equidistant in order to ensure that the protagonism of the parties prevails without favor anyone. But in my point of view, more than talk about impartiality, I think we should talk about multi-partiality, because mediator has to, he must not be indifferent to what the parties bring to mediation, but he must be equally concerned about the interests of each party. So a multi-partiality makes the mediator be aware of the interests of all parties and give the same concern regarding that interesting. So I think the concept of impartiality that is in the law in practical should change to multi-partiality of the mediator. Also connected with the impartiality, we have the independence principle of the mediator. So this principle demands that mediators should act free from any pressure, whether from his own interests, personal values, or external influence. So it cannot be subject to subordination, technical or deontological, of someone else. For instance, it can be imposed on the mediator to reach an agreement in a certain process. So independence means that the mediator is or should not be affected either personally, professional, or financially by the conflict, and he has no interest of his own at stake as regarding the content or the solution to be given to the dispute. So we can divide the independence, the principle of independence, in two main dimensions or requirements. So the mediator should be independent from the people, from the parties, in personal terms, but also he should not have any family, friendship, or professional ties. But also the mediator should be independent from the process. So in the context of the process, the mediator should always take neutral and independent procedural decisions. The mediator should not express the position that he have in that conflict. So independence can be a very tricky principle to respect, and it can be very difficult for the mediator to separate their own his or she own feelings and the conflict. So from a practical point of view, there are some issues that may promote independence and should be a concern to the mediator. For instance, the choice of the mediator that should be agreed by all parties, or if one party chooses the mediator, the other party should agree. And in this case, mediator should make very clear his relationship or her relationship with the party who chooses him, in order there are no doubts may arise about that relationship. At the same time, if regarding the payment of the fees, ideally all parties should pay the mediator. But if only one party pay these fees, it should be very clear how much it will be paid, how it will be paid, in order there are no doubts about whether the payment influenced the mediator regarding the agreements. So it should be very transparent, the relationship between the mediator and the parties, especially the party who will pay the fees of the maritime mediator. Also, when the conflict involves several parties, it is important to create teams of mediators. We already talked about this today. A multidisciplinary team could help to guarantee the independence of the mediators team, and especially in the contact with the parties. So it's quite important. Look now for practical mediators skills and all the ethical requirements that I told before, and the requirements addressed will be reflected in the skills and the capacities of the mediator, because in order to obtain or to respect that ethical principles, the mediator has to be or has to have skills that respect and that comply with the demands of the ethical principles. So mediator has to be a lot of skills. If effective, the mediator should properly combine and structure different types of methodologies, like effective communication techniques, methodologies to foster creativity, or work with large groups. Also, the mediator should be able to interact with innovative meeting structures, because he has to work with many stakeholders with different interests. So, as more said, mediators should have deep methodologic knowledge, plenty of proven experience, and unquestionable reality. Which brings us to an interesting question concerning whether the mediator should be a specialist in the conflict or in the area of conflict. This is, in addition to knowing the techniques and tools of mediation, should the mediator work or be a specialist in maritime fields? I don't know, give a concrete example. If the conflict concerns about an oil spill at sea, should the mediator know about maritime pollution? I will not go deeper into this debate question, because some argue that the mediator should not know the subject matter under discussion, because it's more easy to be free and independent from their values or their his or her opinion regarding the issue in conflict. But there are also some who argue that the mediator has to know the issue in order to understand what the parties say and help them to solve the conflict. So if a mediator is totally unfamiliar with the issue, may have difficulties to understand the interests of the parties. I think in the project, and then we can discuss that, I think we have an intermediated position. So the mediator should have at least have a basic understanding of the subject, and she or he have to know the terminology of the topics under discussion, because that will allow the mediator to support the parties in discussion of the conflict, specifically as regards the formulation of questions and understanding the interests at stake. So at least a basic knowledge of the topics under discussion, I think the mediator should have, without having to be a specialist on the subject. So it will be having in mind this scenario and the analyzed considerations that also we will to create or to organize the course in maritime mediation that will be carried out in July in Leiria, and that we all invite you to who are interested to apply. News about this course will be given in meantime. But before ending, I would like to analyze the answers given by the interviewees from the MEDIMARE project regarding the skills of the mediator. Because I think the results are quite interesting. In fact, although in general, all the interviewees gave a rating of 5 to all the characteristics, it is quite curious to analyze the skills which scored lowest than 5. If you are talking about that skills that have less 5s than the others are in the blue, a different blue. And if we look to the informing the parties during the process, settlement orientation, reconciliation orientation, well, it can be more understandable because the interviewees may understand the mediator just a facilitator of dialogue. So it should not seek for an agreement, or we can say that the interviews think that the mediator or they understand that the maritime conflicts do not aim to reconciliation of the parties, but the mediator should only focus on the solution of the conflict. So the first 3 of these skills that have less 5s, it can be more understandable. But if we think about good summarizing and reframing skills or good questionnaire, in my point of view, is very curious, because I think they reveal that the interviews or the interviews that don't give 5 to that skills, they really don't know what the mediator is or do, because these are the main characteristics of a mediator. And when we are talking about training a mediator, these are the skills that the trainees, the trainers try to develop more. So it's quite interesting why these are the skills that have less than the 5s than the other skills. And I don't know, for final conclusion, I think maritime or training in maritime is needed. So in the imperative, so our project is very relevant and makes sense to do and to prepare people to know, at least to know what is maritime mediation, what is mediation. So thank you so much. And any questions, please.
Thank you, Katia. And yes, I associate myself with your words. It's a great team, as you can see. Does anyone have any question at this point to Katia? I think you were very clear. This is still a part that is under development, right? This is the part that we are dealing now with, the curricula for mediation, and to adjust everything that we've learned so far, that we already knew and have learned recently on maritime mediation, and to adjust it to the needs of, well, of the people, basically, of what the cases that might be integrated into the scope of this project. So if no one has any question, we are getting dangerously to the end of our workshop. Maybe no one has questions, so maybe I would go to the last part of the, which would be the closing words, that I will leave to the end, and to the presentation of another output of the project that we will have available also very shortly. So this is a very opening of many outputs that we have been doing so far. That will be also available in the website of the project. We will have several games to be played, simple games, as will be shown by Fernando, another of our investigators from Coimbra. And we'll just give you a hint of how it works, and then you can, very soon, this game will be available this week, and the others will follow up very shortly. So Fernando, I give you the word so that you can explain how this very easy game works in our platform.
Thank you. So like Professor Dulce said, it's a very easy game. The idea here is to through some situations to put the player or the person thinking about mediation and how some of the subjects might interfere, and based on a decision-making process, we put the player to think about some of the contents about mediation in maritime disputes. So it's a very very easy way to just to put them in the perspective, and the idea here for the game is not so much to create a new world, but just to feel comfortable and pass some of the contents that we have already passed through other outputs of the project. We think about the other communication tools and other contents that we have already in the project. This is just one more contents that we have, and sometimes here in Coimbra we have communication activities and that we have for either schools or in the streets, like for example the European Researchers Night. So it's interesting to have other types of outputs that we can showcase the project results. So I will share here my screen to show you about the game. So this is still a what we call it, a beta version. So we are still, this will be one other test that we have. So based on this test, then we will be able to put it on the website. It's a very easy game. It's the idea here is to put, like I mentioned, the player through a different options of ways or paths that they can follow. So the idea here is they have to choose between one or two options. In this case, it's the ship's deviation game. What we'll think about, so the case here is to reflect about deviation when the ship changes the route, if it's justifiable or not, what we can or cannot do, and interact with some of mediation content. So here to play the game, I will ask, maybe I know that Roberta played already with me, so I don't know if we have any volunteer that want to play and choose, because I know already the different ways, and Roberta also did the game with me. So
Let's ask Marta because she's an outsider. Marta, if you're still there and you want to play, you'll be very welcome. If
I'm here.
So
I don't want to play.
You're the designated player, not the designated driver, designated player. So Marta. So
like I mentioned, the idea here is very simple, just to choose between one or the other option. And then we will reach an end to a game based on 3 or 4 questions that we'll have along the way. And each question will differentiate for the path that we can choose. So in summary, it's a ship Maria was navigating from Ecuador to Qatar. So on its way, it deviated the course to support another ship. Ship Maria saved many lives, but breached the contract with Transports Inc. That will be us in the game. So in the charter contract, the contracting parties was a mediation clause, which made attempt to mediation mandatory for the parties. So the charter, which are looking to sue, claiming that deviation was unjustified. So we question the player, you as a transporter, do you want to start an arbitration procedure against Ship Maria for the damages? That is said. So, and we ask if it's starting an arbitration procedure would be a good idea in this case or not.
I would say no, because you have a mediation clause.
So yes. Indeed, we have a mediation clause. We both signed the contract, so we will have to attempt to mediate. There are 3 possibilities for using arbitration. So here we're talking a little bit about mediation and arbitration. And just to confirm, we explain a little bit what is the arbitration. And we confirmed, should we still move with mediation, or do you want to go back and go to arbitration even though we have this mediation clause?
Let me just read.
As a lawyer, I'm not gonna say anything until I read it.
They do not reach an agreement. Well, I would say I would prefer to go to arbitration after the mediation is not successful.
Okay.
So
this would be my choice.
Yeah. So
since I have a mediation clause.
Okay.
So
still
if we have a
mediation.
So I would
clause,
start with mediation
start
and then
with
I would see.
Okay. So the parties enforce the mediation clause containing the contract, which states mediation takes place according to ICC mediation rules. The owner of Ship Maria wants to invite his friend Bill, who is also his business partner, to mediate the conflict. Would you, as
Another
transporter,
option.
another option?
Another option. It's not possible.
Indeed, Bill is not the right fit for the mediation. The mediator has to be a neutral third party according to ACC rules. And here we have some sort of appendix or annex with more content that it's we can click and go to more rules for those who want to know more. And do you want to choose the mediator alone or with the ship owner if Bill is not the right fit?
Well, I would say it's very difficult to choose, not to choose alone, but this would mean that you have more than one mediator. So I would try to choose with the ship owner, but I don't think this would fit because it will be very difficult. So I would have to choose alone afterwards, but I could try first to have with the ship owner. So I would say together.
Okay, so the other parts appreciate your proactivity. It's a very, like you mentioned, very simple game. Marta is obviously more complex.
I'm enjoying it.
More complex than the reality. The reality is usually more complex than the game.
Yes,
but,
for sure.
Indeed,
yes.
Like I mentioned, the idea here is just to put things in perspective and then to be able to consolidate some of the knowledge or to provide some knowledge for those who don't have any idea what mediation is. So the other parties appreciates. According to ICC rules, the mediator might be chosen in a joint nomination by all the parties, or the parties may agree on the attributes of the mediator to be appointed by the center. So after long discussing, you couldn't decide on a common nomination for the mediator. There is the possibility of requesting an indication for the ICC. Regarding that nomination, what would you prefer? And also here, as you see, there's more content about the ICC rules for those who want to know more. So
well, I would say definitely marine law specialist.
okay.
Definitely.
So
yes.
wise choice. It's just it's a perfect example of the good path of the game. So it would be preferable to have as a mediator a specialist in the field of maritime law to support the parties, particularly because there is an interaction between contractual obligations and obligation of rescue at sea. So you're able finally to reach an internal mediation settlement, according to which the charterer has to compensate in 1/3 of the losses incurred. Ship Maria owner, however, did not pay the amount in the delay agreed, and you, as Transporters Inc., wish to enforce the mediation settlement. Where do you try to enforce the settlement?
I don't remember.
So
The ship was from Ecuador, and
they were going to Qatar.
So, and the charter is from Ecuador or from Qatar? You don't know that.
Ecuador, yes, and you.
It's from Ecuador. The charter.
Ecuador.
So I would say Ecuador because we would. I don't know if we have reinforcement, an international convention for reinforcement in mediation. I believe not. So but I would say Ecuador. But this wouldn't be a solution, really. You know, this wouldn't be a solution. But between both of them, I would say Ecuador.
That's where probably the charter has its assets, right? That's
yes,
also the
yes,
term.
of course. I'm thinking of seizure the assets as well. Not only because the problem with international law, as you were speaking of, is that you may have a decision or a sentence, but then you need to seize the sentence, and that's the biggest problem. So I would think, let me see what the Singapore Convention says about mediation. So I'm learning.
So in this case, for the purpose of the game here, the idea is just to show about the Singapore Convention on mediation, and the settlement agreements are directly enforceable in country bound by the Singapore Convention. In this case, both Ecuador and Qatar are signatories of the convention, so it would be, from the perspective of the convention, would be the same.
No, not really the same. Ecuador would be the question, the solution, really.
I said that too. I said that too. From a legal point of view, both of them are bond, and both of them, under the Singapore Convention, prescribe this immediate, well, automatic, based on the New York Convention on Arbitral Awards, this direct enforceability of mediation agreements, as this one was. But indeed, if you look at it from a strategic point of view, it would have to be Ecuador, I would say, as Marta. So, but in any case, you could try both ways if they have assets in both, because both are bond by the Singapore.
Well, you could do, we could do Qatar, but then you would need the ship to get to Qatar and to arrest the ship. So it would be not so easy. But Ecuador, on the other hand, I don't know, the legislation, the procedural legislation
might be difficult to grasp, right?
Just a small example. I had a few years ago a problem with Saint-Thomé Príncipe, and we couldn't sue the company because the only lawyer that was there became president of the country, and then all the other lawyers didn't answer, and the bar association didn't answer either, so we couldn't sue anyone.
Lack of lawyer, that is something that it's practically unknown of in every.
It's wonderful for Saint-Thomé people, and we have lots of business with them, Portugal, so it was really a comic situation, not very good for the clients, but it was a comic situation.
Marta, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
An integral part of the team during this workshop, and you will be too, as for what we are already concerned. Well, I now, if someone has any question, this is the time, but everyone has been silent so far. So maybe I just close the workshop with my thanks to everyone, to the partners. This is really a very interesting project with partners that are hardworking and nice, and really I think this will go and continue to move on very nicely as it has been so far. So, and we'll have many outputs for everyone to see. Also to the public, thank you for coming. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us. I hope you have enjoyed it and learned. I also want to thank particularly, he's not here, but to Mr. CLIFT, because it was just a grand opening to this workshop. And most probably he will join us in the 1st of July, the date of closing of the project. But until the closing of the project, we have, as we've told you, many things for you. We have the game or games that will be available. We will have, starting on the 13th of March, this online course on mediation that is, as I said, free of costs. You can do it at your own rhythm. It's 25 hours of dedication in total. You can do it for 2 months' time. So it's really very easy, and it grants you a certificate of conclusion of the course. And maybe if you get the bug of the maritime mediation, you have 2 other options to be further engaged in the project. One is we have 3 apprenticeships in Lisbon available. We'll make them public also very shortly in the website. Just check it out through our newsletter. So, and through, well, we'll put it the most widely as possible, Facebook and all social media. So you could apply. This one you have to apply. And also we will have an intensive course of mediation, 2 weeks course, 2 last weeks of June, that will take place in Leiria. We will have online activities, presential activities, visits, everything is already being arranged. And this course is also free of charge for anyone who applies and is accepted. Is free of charge. And also there are on participation in the expenses that you incur. So there is a scholarship that is linked to it, so that you do not have expenses in going to this course in the 2 last weeks of June. So all good things, all good news. Keep posted. Go to the website. Look for us on social media. If you want to receive our newsletter, just send an email to any of us, okay, to any of us, or to the, I'm gonna try to put it, I don't know how to put it into the Q&A, but it's medimare@uc.pt, medimare@uc.pt. This is the email. And just get in contact with us, and then we'll guide you through all of these activities we have prepared. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for helping with this and for being present in this, I think, great workshop. So goodbye everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.